You're strong.
I know.
It's okay. I've got you now.
Just like in the movies.
Welcome to SuperWonder Legacy. I am Jared. I'm here with Brit. What's up, Brit?
Hello, hello.
And today we are discussing what is quite possibly, unlike the Tom King era of Wonder Woman, the most overhated period of Wonder Woman that I have seen in a while. Now, to be clear, not everything in this era is fantastic.
Right.
But when you look at the vitriol that this era gets, and we're talking about New 52 Wonder Woman, and we're talking about not just Azzarello, we're talking about holistically, it's not as horrible as people point it out to be.
Right. I mean, at that time, it was a bestseller. You know, it was hailed as the greatest book, until, of course, the Finch's run. But just like any other book at that time, once they having rotating creative teams, and it was something about the second team that really brought a book down at that time.
Well,
And
that typically happens, and that's part of that was the reasoning that King gave as to why his Batman run tanked in sales, because he kept changing artists. By the way, so you know what you made me do for this episode, Britt? I broke out the Omnibuy.
wow,
This
that
is
is
2 Justice League and 1 Wonder Woman.
wow. That those big books.
Oh, and the Justice League ones I also have in regular trades because when Justice League was coming out as trades, that was around the time that I first gotten in. Like, I got into comics right a year or so after this era started, and I was collecting all the Justice League trades, and obviously Superman, Wonder Woman, you know me. But it's
Yeah.
like I was checking this out, and it's like with Wonder Woman. And actually, I have a friend of mine, and I'm gonna pull up her Twitter account so I can give her proper
Kudos.
credit, because she's like a big supporter of like the Wonder Woman that's like of the Zeus origin and all that stuff. So it's the Twitter account I Can Be Brave. If you're watching that, a shout out to you. But according to her, it's like so many people that she personally talked to became Wonder Woman fans because of this era of Wonder Woman.
Exactly. It's always has been said. New 52 has its flaws. We have talked about that multiple times. However, it did succeed in bringing new fans. Like, regardless of anything, it did its job. The 2021 write up, the overall, I think it was from Polygon, but they did a lot of interviews with editors and writers. I think Scott Snyder, Dan DiDio, think his name Jeff Lemire. I think he was interviewed, and a few more people. They were interviewed, and the overall thing, it was obviously unbiased and everything like that. And this is one of the quotes that actually always used about how Clark and Diana's relationship was very popular, even popular to the point of getting the Superman and Wonder Woman book, and it brought new fans. Wonder Woman was the same way. Yes, the Zeus origin and how we view it now, and even when I reread it over the week, it wasn't as, like, some want to say it was male dominated. It wasn't. It was very complicated. It was more of like, if you love the quote unquote realism of mythology,
Yeah.
that is basically the attraction to this book. It's not about glorifying males. It's not about glorifying Zeus. He was definitely not
Because I
glorifying
got
Zeus.
news for you. Look at the movies that were coming out around this time, like Clash of the Titans, done by the son of Zeus. So it's like the popular perception among a lot of people when it comes to Greek mythology is that the hero most of the time will be the spawn of Zeus.
Right. I mean, even Percy Jackson.
Mhm.
Percy Jackson is a half human demigod, and it's one of the most popular, Disney adaptations and series and everything like that. It has been going on for so long of for some reason people love like these demigods that are the spawns of gods and goddesses. So no, it's not. It wasn't a problem back then, but yeah, every time over the years, some things will age, like fine wine, or it'll age like milk. This, I would say, is very complicated to categorize it because DC still has it in print, and they continue to reprint it. And in 2016, for I think it was Wonder Woman's anniversary, and when it was like gearing up to starting to promote like Wonder Woman is having her movie, Jim Lee said that the Azzarello run was the most popular run that they've had for Wonder Woman. And you can pretty much tell that the Rebirth run, Rucka's Year One, it it was done out of spite in the first place, in trying to supposedly clean up the mess of New 52, but because it was still uh, basically had this negative energy, negative vibe. It was so petty and mean spirited,
Yeah,
and
exactly. I mean,
and
there's a reason why this book, yes, it lasted 35 issues, but when you take that into context of time, that's roughly 3 years.
yeah, it just really gave a new audience something to be interested in for Wonder Woman. And like you always say, if it has a DC label, it is, you know, and it that's what brought you into DC, then you are a fan. You
Yeah,
know, you
exactly.
and this is what the new 52 did. Regardless of anything of like I said, the faults and flaws, it did its job. And that's what, needs to be taken into consideration. And this run, even with its problems, even with the Amazons, and we'll get to that, it still sells and I would say have much more, I guess, more entertaining than the Rebirth run. Because like I
Well,
said, it
here's
was
the other thing. I would ask people if you're watching the audience watching right now, put in the comments. I have a question for you guys. Which would you rather read, this or Tom King? Because so Brit, so as you know, because I dropped the King run and have been going on an absolute. I've got
mhm,
a bunch of back issues and trades for Wonder Woman to read the good stuff. So I got this. I got the omnibus for it. I remember reading it, and I'm like, okay, there's some stuff in this I really don't like. But when I was going through it, I'm like, this is not like the horrible, it should be burned in the pits of hell like description. But do I like how like Poseidon's actually a fish man? No, I don't like the god designs, but for the most part, the rest of it, I'm like, this isn't that bad.
right. The designs can vary. It can be a little bit much. But again, we're trying to just add that different, I guess, really just find that attraction, because 2010 and just pre 52 post crisis, DC was in the toilet. So they basically, it was a free for all creatively, well, no, they had restraints, but as far as designs and some ideas, it was a free for all with New 52, like I said, with trying to gain the attraction of new fans and younger fans at that. That's what they were trying to get at. And of course, once you get older, you look at things in a different way, a different perspective. But it has been it has been over 10 years, since the New 52, and since, Azzarello's run was over, but, and it's almost 10 years of Rebirth. And the thing is, again, you can remember New 52, but I guarantee you, no one will really remember Rebirth Wonder
The
Woman.
only things of Rebirth that I see referenced, or and by referenced I mean like, can you believe they did this? Is like Wonder Woman in the mental institution, and I'm like, yeah, exactly. You notice people keep the fact that people keep bringing up the New 52 to crap on it, and I barely see anyone defend Rebirth. That should tell you something.
Honest, even if it is being defended, it is out of spite of New 52. Like
Yeah,
it
but and what does it also say, Britt? That the DC documentary completely ignored it.
ignored it.
And
Exactly.
they were called out for this. So like, why didn't you bring up Rebirth and how it saved DC from the New 52? I'm like, because the New 52 saved the company, as did the Absolute Universe.
Right. It's basically like clockwork of you know, um it's just some fans have to realize that at some point, we all have different preferences.
Mm-hmm.
We aren't going to like the same things. So we're trying to have like this hive mind, this narrow view of how these characters are. And that's pretty much why DC is in the position that it's in. Because so many of these people used, you know, um, social media to rant and rave and um, threaten a
Mm-hmm.
lot of the editors. And especially, I believe the deal actually said that he wouldn't even take like um, so much of the criticism from social media and like Tumblr
Yeah, he
and
would take it
Twitter.
by sales. That's what you
Yeah.
should do.
And I think, oh, I wish I could remember the writer that says this. I don't think it was Priest, but it was another writer that said that Twitter only represents,
Mark Millar.
yes, 5% or even less than that of basically who supports the books.
Of
And
who
I'm
actually
kind of,
buys the books. Yeah, and I'm
yeah,
like, then why is DC catering to Twitter?
Twitter.
That should tell you something right there.
And
But
then the fact that
yeah, go ahead.
uh, and then the fact that the DO admitted saying that it was some things in Rebirth that he regretted. And
Mm-hmm.
the main thing that he didn't say it without saying it, but the main thing was legacy characters and
Well,
the
you can
Meredith.
take that. Well, you can take the legacy part as implication because DiDio historically hates legacy characters. I got to be honest. Well, here's the thing. I was talking on like I think it was like Under Two Capes or something like that about what if DiDio didn't leave DC, and the funny part is like if he didn't leave DC, there's no way Trinity would have been created as a character because that man hates legacy characters,
Oh,
hates them, or John would never have become Superman.
well, he is the reason why John became Superman for 5G, but I guarantee you John would have been retconned by now. He
Oh
would have been
yeah,
erased. He
oh
definitely
yeah.
would have been erased
Because
because
again, what DiDio recognized is that DC's a business first. You got to go off of sales first, and then
right,
like put this way: if sales align with like ratings, as in the case of like Charles Soule, Superman Wonder Woman, you're like, okay, that's great. That works. We're keeping a book together that's selling great, and the fans love it. That is the ideal situation. But if the book is not working, you kind of have to, or the character is not working. Like, I guarantee you, if DiDio had been at DC now and saw the backlash that like Trinity got, I think at this case he would have taken into account maybe, or like, I don't think Trinity would have gotten a solo series.
oh, most definitely not. No. This is definitely, it's kind of throwing crap to the wall, seeing if it sticks. And what Tom King thought that, basing it around because Damien, because of John, that Trinity would have been the next Damien or John, and again, John, he was a cute kid, and played on like the anime type uh, characteristics and imagery from Jimenez, Jorge, but with him being 18 and now a full adult, and I think it's Secret Six newest issue preview. They take crack jokes about John, and I think they call him Super Junior. They called in this newest preview they called him Superman Light. So, so it's basically like
That's great.
very just like they did in the documentary. DC is very self-aware of the mistakes. However, for some reason, they are so stubborn to try to make what's obviously failing. They are continuing on to try to make it work. Like with whether it's relaunches or renumbering or basically trying to switch up a few things, but it's very contrived and it's just all over the place. They don't care. It's just as long as they keep that basics of basic, the very bland of whatever, then they are just fine. And that's what Didio basically said. He said that they are scared to really, really take risks. And Scott Snyder said that too, is the main verse is very uh, settled, and conservative. But with the absolute universe, they could have more freedom. And you can definitely tell the difference. Um, and with the overhypeness of the DC All In, I mean that's pretty embarrassing. You have the absolute universe. Gladly, yeah, it did have like this big boom of success because your main line is torpedoing. um, with Williamson as the architect for so long, he has not done them any justice. He led Night Terrors. I think he led another event that really just was so abysmal, and
Yeah,
it's kind of like
yeah, Dark Crisis, Night Terrors, and there were a few others, but it's like because here's the thing about Williamson, he's a good writer on like non-event books but a lot of the times he has events that start off well, but then he can't. I don't think he can stick to landing that well.
because he admitted that he doesn't want a lot of confrontation. He doesn't
Mm,
want the drama. So he is very padded and very like he wants to get to a happy ending. Even if he does have a little sprinkle of drama, it's basically like that it's going to have a happy ending. And I mean, as a writer, you just don't limit yourself to that. And these characters, at this point of them just going through events and then acting like nothing happened, it's the same thing as basically Mark Waid's absolute power. The fact that they have some characters that have switched powers, but it really you don't really feel the effect of that. Shoot, pretty much, if it's not for us talking about it, I for, forgot that characters have switched powers.
meets
Um,
a few of them. Yeah, I mean they remind you a few times in Aquaman, but anyway. But we need to keep going. All right. So we're talking with the misconceptions of new 52 Wonder Woman. We're gonna start with the first one, that she was too cold, brutal, and unrecognizable. And again, read the book because she wasn't.
right. It's really because when you see, and this is going to go in later discussion too, but the inconsistency of her characterization, and especially what really hurt them is that 5 year time skip.
Mm-hmm.
And again, it's like a lot of the bashing with New 52, it is so the information is just incomplete. It's very, it's just like if you're going to criticize it, by all means, it does need, to be criticized. However, it's some things that you have to do, like to take consideration of. So in the 52, because of the rush and the push for getting these, teen books, getting these characters at a certain point, you know, doing all this and really just coming up with things, but not really having just that concrete plan. So the characterization for some of these characters is a little off. But what DC could have done is at least, after the first year, just take note and slow down just a little bit and then ease up to um, writing these characters and studying them a little bit better and planning a little bit better. And
Yeah,
I think that
exactly.
that's
That's what I said they should have done. What they really should have done is, okay, I get that they didn't have time to come up with a proper plan. I understand that. But once they get the reboot and get the plan going and get the books going and then they see the returns, then they use the time to come up with a plan.
right. So again, so like we say here, it's very surface level criticism because if you did not read the book, you
Hmm.
would think so. And especially, you know, also with preview images, with the covers, you would basically think that. But as the saying goes, you don't always judge a book by its cover because with New 52 Diana, in her own book, she was very protective of Zola. She she kind of had a sense of humor and tried to be the mediator, and trying to understand her her place. And what I really loved, and it gave a little bit more of the tragedy too, is that Diana was bullied.
Yeah.
She was actually treated as a young girl growing up. It could have been a coming of age story for Diana, especially when you reread. I think it's the annual or the Secret Origin, but with going back of her in issue 0, with going back of her training with yeah, Aries,
Aries.
with her being bullied, not knowing of whether she was made of clay or she was the daughter of Zeus. Whichever one, it just gave you that tragedy, behind her. And what I wouldn't have taken away, and I guess it was still there, but what the Amazons went through. And so it was pretty much like you could have had it more of a misguided retaliation. If you
Hmm.
had the Amazons go through like what they did, reincarnated from, you know, um, women who were abused and murdered and everything like that, those souls were reincarnated, but they basically wanted to, like I said, retaliate. And it was misguided for them. And that's how you can explain why they did what they did to the sailors. And
Glad
what
to hear.
Diana Right. And what Diana did was she was to be the guide for not only the Amazons, but also the gods. And
Hmm.
um, you still have the mother and daughter relationship, that we talk about all the time and root for and love with Diana and Hippolyta. It's just strained and it's that darkness, that's within it. But you see that Hippolyta still loves Diana. She wanted to protect her. And you see, even if Diana was angry with Hippolyta, she still loved her mother. And throughout New 52, that was basically Diana's main wish was to be with her mother again. And there was a scene actually in one of the issues right before Hera turns Hippolyta into stone. She hugs her, and the way her facial expression is drawn, where she's like sad, I feel like if they were to give it Hera like a little bit more depth within, you're fighting between the realism of mythology and then DC's version of the mythology. So what Azzarello did, he did the surface level woman scorned, she's angry, so she's not going to punish Zeus. She's going to punish the women that he had an affair with. And what we could have had was more of Hera's perspective, that she did want to take it out on Zeus, but he was hiding, as a baby, like a coward. And so her way of, I guess, trying to get all of the anger out was, she took it out on the women, even though if they were innocent. Hippolyta, she knew what she was doing, but at the same time, seeing the flashback, she was young. She was like not so much as manipulated by Zeus, but she was enchanted, I would say, by Zeus. And that's what
Beguiled.
he's a Rolling Stone, and all of that jazz. He does that. So
He does that.
so yeah, so going back to Diana though, and like you said earlier, the god designs were questionable.
They
I couldn't
definitely were. I mean, there are a few of them I like, but like Athena being a literal owl woman and like
right.
Poseidon being a fish man, or like even the candle head of Hades, I'm like, no. The only one I really liked was Apollo. Maybe that's because Superman punched it, but it still is good there. But
No, Apollo, I think I I
or
liked his
Strife.
design because he had a little bit of swagger too. Like
Hmm.
he knew as the sun god, he just knew he was basically like the big guy after Zeus or something. Like he tried to
Hmm.
boast his self as that. With Strife, it was very simplistic, but with the dress she had, it gave that chaotic type feel to it. Very simple, but with the tears and stuff, it just seemed chaotic.
Yeah, exactly. So then you get to this because one of the criticisms of this run is the way it changed the Amazons reproducing. Now, here's the thing. All right, I'm going to bring this up. This is the mythologically accurate version of the Amazons because they did do this. And here's the thing: when people talk about they want the Amazons to be mythologically accurate when they praise it in the Wonder Woman comics, I'm like, you realize that there's little evidence that the Amazons themselves were gay, right? The way they did reproduce is this. Now, this is where I'm like, this is one of the changes I don't think they can do it because here's the difference between the mythology Amazons and these Amazons. Yes, DC Amazons are still warriors, but they're also still warriors for peace. The mythology Amazons were straight up warriors. So I'm like, you can't change that, particularly with what the Finches have the Amazons do later. You really can't like change particularly if the Amazons have existed for so long as consistently just that and been like, yes, again, they've been warriors. We've all unfortunately read Amazon's Attack, but you can't like all of a sudden change that to something the complete opposite of that.
Exactly. And that's what basically I'm trying to say is that it's a battle between the realistic version of mythology and DC's version of mythology and the Amazons. And that's pretty much what the new 52 Amazons were. They were the accurate versions. Was that good? No. However, story wise, if it were to have written a little bit better, and like I said earlier, if you had the Amazons show that it was a misguided retaliation from, being done wrong by men, I think that would have gone a little bit smoother,
Mm-hmm.
just a little bit. Um, and with Diana herself, she she showed that she was still the bridge. She showed
Mm-hmm.
that she still had that free spirit, wanting her own path, wanting to be the adventurer, wanting to basically just she her mission wasn't completely of peace. It was more of an adventurer, and you do have that more warrior side, but it wasn't the warrior woman that we see in that's just sword happy go lucky. She still had that maturity and that consciousness that we know Diana would have. She just wasn't that ball of sunshine or, or too much of that innocence that we are used to from Perret.
Yeah, exactly. And it's like, see, here's the thing. It's like this gets into a problem that I kind of have with the comic book fandom is that the DC fandom tends to think that DC is more happy-go-lucky and like, gee, occurs, and I'm like, it's objectively not. But going on to our next misconception is that it made Wonder Woman not be compassionate and just be another warrior, which, yeah, she had warrior parts, like with the god parts where she took off the cuffs. That was dope. But saying that she lost her compassion is objectively wrong.
Right. And also her sister, I want to say it's Sakaya. She was a child that Hera, of course, killed out of retaliation and resentment and everything from Zeus. But the fact that Diana basically freed her spirit, you know, with seeing that, you see that compassion that Diana has. We see even just throughout New 52, Diana wanting to um, be an inspiration for young girls, and again, even if it is a darker universe overall, more realistic, quote unquote, you still have some sprinkles of what we're used to. It's just that these characters were young, they were inexperienced, their worlds were a little bit darker, but they had it basically felt like they had to really go through hell and back to get where they are, where we expect them to be.
Yeah,
um and
exactly.
and, and especially with Diana, because it became so much more complex for her, because again, you're trying to bridge that DC mythology with realistic mythology. Yes, it did go a little bit overboard, but we see that what Azzarello was really trying to set up was a redemption story for everyone around Diana. And
Yeah.
that's pretty much what Diana is about as her character. She
Which
is
it's
the
interesting. This is very similar to what Kelly Thompson is doing with Absolute Wonder Woman in the very first issue. She softens Cersei and makes Hell a home. In this, she was redeeming everyone else around her. That's a great way to put it.
exactly. So no, we still have Diana there. It's just the execution. Is all about the execution, and it's all about some of the choices I would say to get there were questionable, but you still have it there. Um, Even if it is, like I said, in sprinkles, you have it there. And what she did for Hera, she really treated Hera like the what I would have wanted was a little bit more of like the stepmother, or that type of um in-depth resentment, but in actuality, Hera does have an admiration for Diana. It's like she doesn't blame Diana, and she knows Diana's heart. She knows what she stands for, what
And
she represents.
you want to talk about Diana being compassionate, not a warrior? Diana has every right to hate Hera for what she did to Hippolyta and the
Okay.
Amazons. She doesn't.
Yeah. If anything, she actually helps Hera and lets her stay in her
Yeah,
apartment.
she has every right to say screw you, yet she doesn't. And I'm like, that is 100% Diana. I don't know what the problem is here.
It's only because of a lot of the not so good parts are
Mm-hmm.
emphasized more than the good parts. So you
Exactly.
have the emphasis on the Amazons, that flashback scene. And it's like that's the only thing that people key in on, which, yeah, it was misguided. But again, you could have had the Amazons um, give a little bit more detail that this is wrong of the Amazons, that they have to have that redemption. And again, this is, when you read the full story, it is very long, but when you read the whole story, it is about redemption. And also it is Diana that's the key to all of the other characters' redemption, or letting them see the light of something that they have to change. Even with Hades, um, how he wanted Diana to marry him, and she said that I love you. I don't love you romantically, but I love you. So
So you mean that it's possible for Diana to love everyone but not be romantically attracted to everyone?
right, yes, that is very possible.
Mm-hmm. You know I had to say that. So,
Shady, shady, shady.
oh, you know me. But then we get to our next one, Brit. This is one that we're gonna really talk about.
Mhm.
Is Super Wonder, because here's the thing. Tell me if you get this vibe sometimes. But am I the only one that thinks that some of the Wonder Woman fandom don't want the male characters showing up at all?
They don't.
Yeah, I
No,
was like, so she's in a shared comic book universe. The other characters have to show up. Now, have there been writers that have overemphasized that? Tom King, yes, but
right,
it can't be. It can't be completely excluded.
right. And here's the thing, and we've said this multiples of times, but Clark, even with Perez, Clark has been basically, the one male character in terms of superpower that's been the closest to Diana. And his perspective or his role for her matters because, and especially now, within the New 52, he is he was the antithesis of Hercules for Perez run, and he is that now, or then with New 52 with Zeus. He and the fact that he supports Diana and respects her, he never overshadowed her. It's more so, if anything, it's Clark that's learning from Diana more than she is being taught supposedly by him. Yes, he does give her that out of, you don't have to be, Wonder Woman 24/7. However, that, I would say, Diana teaching Clark about celebrating his culture, and him seeing that, how we see at the end of issue 12 when he did become more open, and just having that, it really showed the perspective of what Soule said in an interview, that if he could have, he would have changed the title to Wonder Woman and Superman, because reading Superman and Wonder Woman, it did felt more like it was, giving our Diana's perspective more, and leaning more to that she was right, in
Mm-hmm.
some of their arguments, some of their conflicts, and natural conflicts, not the contrived stuff that um
Tomasi.
Tomasi did, but the more natural things that, those bumps, those learning bumps that they needed to, go through.
Yeah,
That
exactly. But
it was Clark that, learned more from Diana.
yeah, exactly. Oh well, I still say they equally learn more, like with the whole secret identity thing. But it is more like, well, and also I think particularly in volume 2, in the Charles Soule book, Diana did learn to be more open about her emotions, like with the whole "I love you" thing. So
Right.
there is that, but I see what you're saying, and it would have been interesting if the title was Wonder Woman and Superman, but to a degree, Superman Wonder Woman flows off the tongue more, so I guess that's why they did it.
Yeah, and I think they do alphabetical order anyway.
Mm-hmm.
So that's that. But yeah, this relationship, if you actually read the book, even if you read Justice League and you see from jump, and again, people emphasize on the very minuscule things that's it's important, like their first meeting of saying the "you're strong, I know" part, but that's not what attracted them. It was more so, if you want to say, the "you're strong" part was that Clark basically, he had never seen a
Yeah,
woman.
my headcanon is Clark got nervous because he'd never seen anyone so beautiful. Because this happens with guys when we come to a really attractive girl, we're like, quick, say something cool, say something cool. And they're like, you're strong. And in his head, I bet he was like, nice.
Yeah, it's something like that. And it was basically a compliment to Diana that it's a first, it's a woman. She's not supposed to be in this field. And it's the total opposite. I think it was the Secret Origins where when Diana first met Steve, and he says, uh, "You're strong for a girl," or something like that. But contrast with that of Clark's response was that he just says, "You're strong," and it's basically giving her that of what this relationship is about is equal respect. That he is aware that of her, yes, physical strength, but also just that bravery that she has, and just, yeah, she's very beautiful and everything like that, while also contrasting how saying dibs. So it's a lot of things that you have to really take note of about their relationship. And we've said this multiple times that we would have liked for them to, whether it's slow it down a little bit to build up to it, or within the Soule book, give us flashbacks of them teaming up more, and really just building up to them getting together.
Yeah,
I mean, again,
exactly.
that's because we can talk about it like that. It's such an easy fix that all of all of the complaints, it's kind of like it's not that much a big deal, and you're making a mountain out of a molehill. These are easy fixes. It's just the and it's not even time, and it's not even time because they had plenty of time. It's just the giving the creative, um
The freedom to do it.
the freedom, yeah. So with the relationship in Soule's book, no, first in the Justice League 12, they have this, uh how many like two 4 pages or whatever
Around that,
of
yeah.
this conversation, and they're basically saying exactly what what drew them together is that understanding of being outsiders, and how they couldn't be free to be themselves. They couldn't be free to get close to anyone because it is dangerous, and you have to live in fear that if I'm so close to this person, I'm, like I said, putting them in danger. And with building up to, especially Diana, so young and traumatized with Steve and everything like that, she just wasn't open to that. And with that, with um, rereading issue 12, and up to that point, I think it was just the beginning of the Graves arc, and how Diana was 18 when she came from the island with Steve. And if he is to be like this high ranking officer, if you want to get technical and have the realism, Steve is basically in his early 30s. So you
Mhm.
have a very innocent, in John's Justice League book, Diana was way more naive and way more immature than she was in her own book, and even in Soule's book. So the misconceptions really are from the Justice League. And the reason why I feel that she was downplayed a lot of her intelligence and her emotional, you know, is not just because she was young, it's because Johns tried to give Steve a little bit more importance to her, especially with trying to force this first relationship. And how he wrote Steve was he it was kind of like a male fantasy, this high ranking officer. He is the liaison of the Justice League, and he's um, dating, Wonder Woman, and he, knowing that she doesn't know about, man's world relationships, he felt like he had to teach her, and and it wasn't to help her just adjust to man's world. It was for her to learn his way, his perspective of relationships and stuff like that. And I just felt like with reading that, you know, that is why I don't care for traditional relationships because,
Well, there are a few of them that actually, that at least I think work, like Hal and Carol, for instance.
right, those, well, I mainly would say Clovis and Wonder Trail because within those relationships, it's a lot of downplaying Clark and Diana's intelligence, and they're making them emotionally fragile and very codependent on Lois and Steve.
Oh,
To
you mean essentially the love interests that are humans, if you will.
right, and it's kind of like even if Clark and Diana are quote unquote outsiders, they still have intelligence. They still have emotions. They still have gone through things that any human of man's world would have gone through. Like earlier, I mentioned Diana was bullied. So she felt that. She might have not been in a romantic relationship, but she knows what love is. Um, and with trying to emphasize Steve so much and how she was basically gaslit and guilt tripped into caring for him. She didn't love him because, again, she's young. So she doesn't really have that grasp just yet on her own feelings of settling for a romance. And you can, kind of argue, well, she didn't um, have that feeling for Steve. How could she have it with Clark? It's because of that foundation of understanding. And Steve did not understand Diana. He was
Yeah,
trying to
exactly.
he was trying to take her way too fast. He was trying to manipulate her to um, have this sort of possession of her. And the one thing that I didn't like, or well, it's a lot of things I didn't like,
Well, yeah, I
but
was about to say one thing.
but it was in one panel where Diana didn't know what hand holding was. And I'm kind of like, again, Johns, you didn't have to have her not know what hand holding was. You did not have to have her like overly because of a TV. Um,
I said this before we started recording. This is John's basically treated Diana like with that, like she was formed like the clay origin. She was formed out of clay, but she was formed as a grown woman, and she had just been released into the world. Like she didn't even know practically how to breathe.
exactly. And I really did not like that. The even with, Clark taking her to Smallville, and it that was way more mature and a much better display of Diana. Just it brought you back to Diana's interaction when you first when she first comes to Man's World in the Perez room. With seeing all these people, and they're so fascinated by Superman and Wonder Woman, and then he takes her to this to Smallville, and it's such a peaceful place, and he explains to her this is why I do what I do, but at the same time, I still have a life beyond it. I don't let it control me. With Steve, it was Diana needed to, they even had it in the animated movie where Diana had to meet the president. Diana had to meet this and that. We saw in Throne of Atlantis, Diana saying that she never had a dinner before, just a casual dinner date. Um, it was always just Wonder Woman. And that really speaks volumes of how Steve treated her, that she was just Wonder Woman. She wasn't Diana.
Yeah, exactly.
So
Which, by the way, so it's kind of funny is it's by the way, that was actually in the comic and not the movie. The whole never have a dinner date thing. In the movie, that they talk about the fact that
well,
they can just like hang out and just be, because here's the thing, and this gets back to what I want to say before about how Diana learned stuff from Clark. I mean, this wasn't Justice League, but still, she because the way Diana sometimes came off like this is a little bit of a workaholic being a superhero, but Clark taught her it's okay to like detach and deplug.
right. Whether it's a workaholic or a celebrity,
Yeah.
as um the Roman holiday that we've talked about, that
Hmm.
movie, that is the relationship that Clark and Diana have. Is more so of them, especially with Clark. He's not trying to mansplain things to her. He's not trying to control her or make her do things, to fit him like Steve did. And that is how her relationship with Steve was presented. It was him trying to control her, that she owed him, you know, um, and even though he's the one who crashed on her island,
Hmm.
um, and it, like I said, it really gave this male fantasy type thing of, especially with him being a high ranking officer in the military, and of course just this average American, and how uh, it really feels like that sometimes DC really has this subtext of, or feeling of trying to glorify like the more American characters, you know. And with Clark and Diana, they have to conform to Lois and Steve and glorify them. And they
Hmm.
have to be emotionally dependent on them. And how Clark and Diana are, they are both highly intelligent, but for some reason their intelligence just is thrown out the window. So that is what we pretty much dealt with Justice League, especially with Diana, is that she was really quick to act. In Soule's book and Azzarello, Diana wasn't that quick to act. She was very mellowed out. She was in and she was strategic. She was she just took her time, with it, even if it was like you know, and a really emotional type. She still just was very calm. But with uh John's, he made her overreact a lot. Yeah, we had moments, funny moments when she talked talked to trash talked Hal. We have good moments where she made the point of trying to help in third world countries, and but it was undercut basically by Batman coming and saying, "Well, Diana, don't talk like that because the government or whatever will think you're being evil with trying to take over the world just because she voiced that she wanted to help third world countries,
And
regardless
she
of."
never said we were going to take over the world. That's the thing. You take away the context. What she said was, it would be, honestly, it would be so easy for us to take over the world. She's not saying let's do it.
No, she's basically saying that what's wrong with helping women and children, giving them food and water, and yeah, it's basically the US government in a sense, like, forget them. We are global heroes. We are supposed to help globally. But Clark, obviously, he is more experienced than Diana, 4 years more experienced. And when he went up against the government, they tortured him. So I'm pretty
Yeah, I'm
sure,
pretty sure. I love that one part in Superman Wonder Woman when Steve says, "Hey, why don't you let Zod come with us? The U.S. Government can be very hospitable." And then it just cuts on Clark's darkened face, and he goes, "Yeah, trust me, I'm well aware at the U.S. Government's capacity to make an alien feel welcome."
and the thing is, again, how Steve was written in that way is
He's
that
such
he
a
was
douche.
yeah, he is so manipulative. And
See, this is the era that made me loathe Steve so much. I'm like, that dude, D-bag.
But the thing is, he's been like that
Yeah.
for a long time. It's just the fact that, of course, revisionisms. That's all it is. And
Mm-hmm.
and then with even Rebirth, he was the same way. He guilt tripped Diana. He was sulking and was saying, "Oh, you were with Superman, and who am I?" And so Diana, of course, had to be written as manipulative, manipulated. She had to be guilt tripped, and she had to throw herself under the bus by saying my relationship with Clark was easy. It was uncomplicated. It was um it was also that I'm not good with romance and love. It's like, Diana, you are the embodiment of love, not romantic love, but you are the embodiment of love, period. So to say that she's not good with that, yeah, you're trying to make this work with Steve
Also,
and
if you have a character say, I'm not good with love, why do you immediately put them in a relationship?
right. At least with Clark and Diana, she she was very hesitant, but again, the foundation for them and why she was so um it was easy for her to be with Clark is because he understood her. And he basically gave her room to see something that she wanted to, and that she enjoyed, instead of being so confined again as Wonder Woman and just a government, uh, basically playing a government stooge in a sense because of Steve. She didn't want that. She wanted to be free, and Clark gave her that outlet. So that is why their relationship works, and why it was so. If it had been written a little bit better in Justice League and given that room to breathe, we would have seen this perspective. It's more so like you have to really sit down and read it and make your own analysis, but also just put the pieces together to be like, oh, that's the idea that they were going for, regardless of the execution. I get it now. So again, with reading practically all three books, you know, or the important parts of Wonder Woman within the New 52, I get it now. I get the her relationship with Clark was complicated. Her relationship with Steve, it was a young thing. It was something that's very inexperienced, but that didn't truly um, equate to being in love, especially with him being the first man she met, and she wasn't looking for a relationship. And again, the way that they met in Secret Origins, how he was saying, "Oh, you're strong for a girl," and just that sarcasm. And I believe it's also Athena came to her and basically said that she would get a ticket. So Steve was basically like a ticket out, like a more so like an excuse of, well, I can, take
He's a
him
plot
back.
device. That's what I've told you all the whole time.
Basically,
His usefulness ends for her the minute she leaves that island. Then he serves zero purpose. I mean, before you say connect her to mankind, I will bust a gut. Anyway, so now what Britt and I are gonna do,
exactly.
yeah, because here's the problem with New 52 discourse on Twitter. Too many people forget that these characters appeared in other books like Justice League, Superman, Wonder Woman, such. So we're gonna do a comparative case study of Wonder Woman throughout like Justice League, Azzarello, and Charles Soule, which were the three prominent ones. And also the Finches, because they had a decent run. It wasn't the best. We'll talk about it in a second, but to start off with the Justice League run, what people have to understand about this book per se to start off is that here's what this book had to do. This was the relaunch book for literally an entire universe, because Flashpoint had just happened, and this was the first book that DC was putting out. So this had to establish the overall tone and everything like that. And as for Wonder Woman, I will say one of my favorite moments from the first volume is when Steve walks into the waiting room of the White House, and Diana's just gone, and then they go, where, and then he asks the guards, where did she, and then they go, oh yeah, she got bored, so she just got up and walked out. And then Steve asks, why didn't you stop her? They point out a hole in the wall. They go, you're kidding, right?
Right, and exactly. And that is what I'm saying, is the fact that she was just a prop for the government. She had to work for the government. She was waiting. Why is she waiting in the White House? Like, what why do you have her, like I said, just as a prop? And then for Steve to control her, um where she can go. And in that third issue, when she goes to find the ice cream, yeah, was it a little childish, played childishly? Yes. Did she have to have the swinging sword? No. And that's the thing, is that John made her like this happy-go-lucky warrior that she wasn't. It could have been something very nice just to have her walking around, loving the scenery, curious, and people are following her around, and then she stops with a little girl, and she is fascinated by ice cream. You could have had that very beautiful scene. Cut off the sword and cut off her looking for a harpy or whatever like that. And then yeah, you have Steve dramatically telling her that she shouldn't have left, and that it was for the president or whatever he said. He was basically talking to her like a father figure. Again, it was very weird. In
Well,
their
in the
relation,
animated movie, she even says, you sound like my mother.
yeah, and you don't say that to, if that's supposed to be like your significant other for that
Oh, and
time.
remember, it would later be revealed that Steve emotionally manipulated Diana because she wouldn't say "I love you" back.
Yes.
And
He
compare that to Clark. Clark, yeah, he was upset about it, as revealed when he had the last one. He was trained to Doomsday, but he never pressured her at all. He was more like, she'll get to it when she gets to it. I know she loves me.
Right. Even Diana says, she's basically says, I know, you know that I love you. So when she said it, um it was a surprise to him. And even in issue 12, when I I would say that for New 52 Diana, for her to be closed off, it makes sense because of just, again, all the emotional upheaval in her own book. If Azzarello was a little bit more of a team player, and even Soule did call this out, and it's basically like, why couldn't Clark at least reference some of the things in the Wonder Woman book? It didn't have to be completely isolated as it was, and communicate with Soule so he can connect things a little bit better. And that's what he was trying to do. And I commend him for the effort, because he did do as best he could, and it did produce a good book. But to really understand why Diana couldn't just outright tell Clark that she loved him, but at the same time, she showed it with her actions, and that she was actually with him. You know, um, I think that Soule did a good job even if he didn't have that communication with Azzarello. And the fact that she
Plus,
did tell. Mhm.
no,
Oh,
I was gonna say I loved her reaction when he said "I love you." He goes, "I love you," and she goes, "Of course you do."
right. Or when she tells Zod that he's mine,
Mhm.
she's
In
she's basically
Kryptonian.
right. She's basically letting you know by actions or by any other words that she does love him. And that's the thing, is that that is why the relationship works, because it is, in a sense, you are compromising, but it's not in that of just one making the sacrifice, or something over the other. It is of them understanding each other and balancing out, the just their different ways of certain things, of how they communicate, of how they do certain things. And that is how you balance the differences that they have. And also it is complemented by their similarities. Um, but Diana and Steve, they don't have similarities, not in that sense of um why they will be together. Like, I have yet to see anyone actually explain why Diana and Steve are together. And the only thing that is always brought up is that he was the first man that she met, and the humanity thing. That's it. But it's kind of like she is not emotionally or dependent on him. She has her humanity. She's just from an island. A lot of people need to understand and get it through their heads that Diana is an earth woman. Like, and not only that, she's the purest earth woman, being that whether you have the clay origin or even in the terms of the Zeus origin, she is still pure human. I don't see how um you can discredit her, but except like Percy Jackson, or something like that. Any other demigod type characters, their humanity isn't questioned. Um,
Yeah, exactly. And that's the funny part, because it's like, okay, wait a minute. She is literally, if you're going with the clay origin, like you said, she is literally an Earth woman. So I don't know what the hell you're talking about.
right. But yeah, that whole thing with Steve, and like I said, just rereading Justice League and seeing how problematic Steve is for Diana, especially when she is that young, and pressuring her within that relationship. It feels like it's a pressure thing with trying to stick with the traditional relationships. And then we go on to the ending of Justice League for New 52, and how Johns wanted the synergy from DCEU, and having her, now she says that she loves Steve, and wanting to downplay her relationship with Clark and stuff like that. And what was very much a double standard was how some fans started to like the 52 Wonder Woman only because she was downplaying her relationship with Clark, and she supposedly was having feelings for Steve. And it's kind of like, you know, that was more so out of nowhere, because this whole time she, and from the beginning, she didn't love Steve. Even if you say that she cared for him, or John's, when she figured out, or uh, Tracy, Steve's random sister, told her that he was captured, and having Hal say that we know how you feel about him and stuff like that, it, it still wasn't played so much as Diana was truly in love with Steve. And in Forever Evil, she was wrapped in a lasso, and she said, "I love you, but I just love you as a friend.
Hmm.
I don't, and I've moved on, so should you." So if she was wrapped in a lasso and said that, first of all, that really, I just thought about that, but that really just kind of kicks Rebirth, uh, yeah, kicks
Yeah,
Rebirth
when particularly
off the
when
cliff.
she, particularly the way. Rucka put. Well, remember, this is the series that basically had Diana say, "I've never been home," despite the fact that Batman, Superman, and Deathstroke have been to the island. So I'm like, wait a minute here.
Yeah, so you're telling me that Diana told, wrapped in the lasso, she told Steve that she didn't love him, that she had moved on, that she loved him as a friend, and now all of a sudden she is in love with him, and her and Clark were just friends, but in a sense they were just, screw buddies basically. Yeah, no, that again, that is why this version of Wonder Woman is so um misconstrued as a bad version, because you have writers who and particularly Johns, who wanted his way, and he would do one thing and uh, do another, and especially too with his conflict between Clark and Diana that he was actually called out on. He said that a relationship has its ups and downs and ups, and it was during the Trinity War when Diana, in that awful panel that so many Wonder Woman fans post, and it should be ignored. But when she says, the reason why I don't have many villains or something like that is because when I
We'll
deal with
get
them,
to,
I deal
actually,
with
you know
them.
what? Screw it. That's it. That image is right here on the weaknesses of this run.
I can't stand that panel, and especially because Johns was confronted, and it's kind of like that whole thing is it's not taken out of context because well, it is and it isn't, because Johns disregarded that in Diana's own book she wasn't dealing with the usual um enemies, villains. She And also, if she supposedly deal with her villains, then Cheetah should have been dead. But no,
Mhm.
she felt bad and she wanted to save her. That was just John's again trying to make conflict between Clark and Diana, and that is again what we continue to say. Stop trying to do contrived conflict between them, because one or the other or both are going to look bad. And that is what Johns did, and that is what Tomasi did to make the
Okay.
relationship.
I will allow me to offer a little counterpoint.
Hmm.
On the next page, when Clark says, "I trust you're not talking about killing them, Diana," she says, "Only if it comes to that." So what that tells me is, again, it sounds like that aligns mostly with my opinion on the no kill rule, where it's basically they will not use killing as a first option. That's just telling me. And for the Cheetah example, you could say it never came to that with Cheetah, or because you notice in the run for in the Azzarello run, she straight up killed Firstborn.
Well, with that, she had no choice.
Yeah,
That's true.
that's telling you right there. She says only if it comes to that.
Well,
Is it a
that's why.
little too simplistically said? Yes, but I'm like in the next page, it kind of at least addresses that kind of.
Well, that's what I'm saying. That's why I'm saying that it's out of context, but then it's it's out of context.
Could it
Let's
have
just
been
say
phrased a lot
a little
better?
bit.
Yes,
Yes,
yes.
yes, definitely. And again, it still goes into trying to do contrived conflict, though. And as you said, it should have been phrased a little bit better. But the way Johns wanted it, he he wanted it to have that drama that we just don't care for. Um, and like I said, one or the other is they're going to look bad, especially with Tomasi's contrived conflict, and even from the first issue of him taking their first meeting and turning it antagonistic and having Diana be like this cold man hater, warrior woman type thing, and even the goddess of war title had the way Tomasi, um, again, all of that, rewriting how Diana explained it, it really just took away a lot of the development that she had from Soule and from Azzarello. I mean, even Finch, I would say that she was more editorial driven, and but even with her, she tried to have Diana a little bit more emotional. Maybe it was a little bit immature at some point because, okay, so there's a scene in the Finch's Run where Diana has a teddy bear and she's holding it, cradling it. If you don't read the first couple of pages of that first issue and you don't pay attention to the detail, you would miss that that teddy bear belongs to a child that drowned.
Mm-hmm.
So Diana finds the teddy bear and she takes it because she feels like, this could have been prevented, that a child was lost. And so she's taking that, basically as a comfort, and of course Diana is that, not so much as a motherly figure. I would say because of New 52, she's more like a big sister. So, just that type of figure. So she's trying to honor that child and keeping, preserving, you know, the child's teddy bear. But anyone would see that and think that, oh, she's holding a teddy bear, like she's emotionally immature. That's not it. So it's things that people definitely take things out of context, and then it's just the context needs to be a little bit better to understand, because some people, they don't like to read, they don't like to comprehend. Even if they do comprehend, they like to um purposely misinterpret things, and that overall it just feels like that's what New 52 Wonder Woman um
Yeah, exactly.
basically had.
Mm-hmm. So then we go to the next run, Charles Soule, arguably the best version of both characters.
Right. So with Soule's, he, and this was said because there was a Reddit poll, and this is when Reddit was a little bit better and controlled. And in the sense of control, I mean that when you had arguments on, message boards, you did have the back and forth of fans, but it wasn't like it is now, where it's overly the
Toxic?
yeah, it wasn't overly toxic. I mean, there was some toxicness, it was, but I think that it just wasn't as bad as it is now. So, and people were a little bit more fair. So they ran a poll, on DC's Reddit, and um, one of the books for Superman that had the highest choice rating was Superman and Wonder Woman. And then for when Wonder Woman was at first in the category of the Justice League, and so Wonder Woman was actually number one for the Justice League category. And a lot of the opinions, uh, commentary, I mean, it was said that Sewell's Superman and Wonder Woman, he was able to bridge, connect, and just balance them out as characters. He was trying to connect them, and of all these different type personalities that they were given from um, Clark, the way Lobdell wrote him in Superman, the way Greg Pak wrote him in Action Comics, or whoever was on Action Comics. It seemed like Action Comics has a lot of rotating creative teams, but I think it was Pac. Then you had Justice League and any other spinoff, Batman and Superman. And you have these multitude of personalities, and it's kind of like, which personality is the correct one? or how can you balance them out to be this, to feel like the same character? And that was the same thing with Diana. And Soule really tried to connect that. And again, he did an effective job, you know, with them and made them likable, made them understandable. And that's why the book was so popular. And yeah, it was a lot of people who doubted the book, who wished for its downfall. Um, some speculators and tried to, before even reading the book, they tried to downplay it, tried to judge it, and even predict what the story would be. They, you know, how you have Dan Jurgens saying that Superman and Wonder Woman are it's fanboy porn. So that's basically what some of the traditional fans also said about the book before it even came out. And especially with the art, because the art is spectacular. But Clark and Diana have, when they're together, when they're drawn together in a romantic sense, even Adam Hughes, you know, Wonder Woman 141 cover, is so effortless with their, with that romantic vibe that they give, and have both are drawn in such a um, sexy manner. You
Mm-hmm.
know, you have Yannick that says that said that them having a shower scene was deemed as too racy and too sexy.
Too sexy.
You have Tony Daniel. They were just laying in bed, and he said that editorial said it was too sexy too. So it's kind of like they have this natural sexiness, and but it's very tasteful, and the art is so, it stands out that, you know, uh, it would make the right people uncomfortable because you see the potential of this pairing, and add that to very respectful writing, then yeah, that will um, be an even bigger threat to the traditional status quo. So, in addition to Soule being a immigration lawyer too, that really helped to understand um, the, the point of Clark and Diana's relationship, but also them as individuals and wanting them to have that outsider's perspective.
Yeah, exactly. And so then you get to the main theme of the. So there are multiple themes there where like they both are at different stages emotionally, but they both like help each other open up. And it's one of those series where when you read the first 12 issues, I say 12 issues because the rest of it is utter gabahe, to quote Jay Heat. It's really, when you look at the way Clark and Diana are at the beginning of the story to where they are at the end of issue 12, like she has just said I love you to him, and that's like the final culmination of her opening up to him. And I just realized that when you think about it, you can think of those 12 issues as just one epic story.
Right. It's very much a relationship that grows in a realistic way. You at first it's a thrill, you know, and but at the same time you're going to have doubts. You're going to have to grow together, and you're going to have to see each other's perspective of certain things and see, okay, how can we make this work? How can we balance this out? And that is where we get shelter from the storm, you know, that quote from, and you see the maturity in Diana. She's actually more mature than Clark because she is the one she has her doubts, but at the same time, she is very sure about Clark, you know, as a partner for her. And that is the one thing, again, that makes this relationship much better than trying to force her with Steve, because you see the difference. And especially with written with Johns, you know, even if he did write Diana still a fish out of water and a little bit of the overreaction of a warrior or something like that, for some reason with Clark, she was still written with such, you know, maturity. And even if she was dealing with like these different emotions and, you know, this emotional upheaval, she still was able to control it than be emotionally dependent on someone to tell her how to feel. Or um again, she just really, when reading with Steve, she really feels like that 18-year-old that doesn't know how to navigate through anything herself. But with Soule, she did. She, even if she did, she was lost a little bit, and I think it was issue 3, called Reflections, and how she went to the island to talk to Hippolyta as a statue, but she really wanted to have that talk with her mother, and with basically using uh, Hippolyta's statue as a sounding board, but Diana already knew the answer,
Hmm.
you know, to all of her concerns. It's like that is the maturity, that is the growth that we should have seen, but we don't see that in John's book, because he wanted that drama, but he also with you know, trying to write a multitude of characters, and it just wouldn't work. And then you have to have that investment in the character. You have to you have to know that character. And as much as long as Johns has, you know, dealt with these characters, it really was a shame that he, regardless of them being a new iteration and stuff like that, it's still the fact that that core, just like we talked about with New 52 Superman, is still that core of values and um, basically the basics of the character that doesn't change. So that's the same thing that happened with New 52 Wonder Woman. She was in a dysfunctional um, world with the gods, with the Amazons, but she still stood out as the one that was the bridge. She was the one that should have been more mature. She was the one that should have been the beacon, you know, to guide them. And yes, she did in Azzarello's run, at the end of their redemption and everything. But of course, editorial just basically kicked that off the cliff for what
Hmm. Well, that's a
the Finches
very
had to do.
that's a severe understatement.
But at the same time, it was still, that was the point of that story. The long 35 issues, that was the point of that story. And then with Soule, he made this relationship work. Um, and as we've said, if he would have had a little bit more time, pretty sure he would have done flashbacks for Clark and Diana to really solidify their relationship. And
Like when Tomasi did it, but ended up screwing it up.
yeah, and again, he for him to say no conflict, no story. I mean, yeah, yeah, Sherlock, but the conflict has to make sense to the characters, and it to be contrived and make the characters unlikable and antagonistic towards each other. That wasn't the answer, and so you're just alienating the fans of that book. And to know that, you know, basically that was done on purpose, that is why I really just don't have respect for Tomasi.
Me
And
either.
to a lesser extent to Johns, because he was the one who, I believe he was the one that kind of put Tomasi on the book. You know, and just the way that he orchestrated Rebirth and everything like that, to go back to his childhood and wanting to have Superman back to the Donner type way and everything like that. It's just like you could have done a little bit better, you know, with 2010 and the start of New 52. It was pressure from WB, so you can't use that as to why Rebirth was so drastic. And also, Rebirth was definitely a back down memory lane of this apology, so called, to post
And by
crisis
the way,
plans.
they literally apologized. Like there was a point at a con where they said, "Yeah, we screwed up, and we're going back to, and we changed too much." Essentially, is
And the
what they
thing
said.
is, what's crazy is that they were pressured by WB
To
to
make those
make those
changes.
changes.
And I'm like, hey, you're just right back to that spot. And in fact, again,
Exactly.
my friend Robert said that think his comic book store owner told him that DC pre-absolute universe was it was in that same situation in terms of sales. So I'm like, yeah, isn't it kind of funny how things like the new 52 or the new 52, if properly executed, can actually save your company. But anyway, so then
Exactly.
we so then we get to the next stage of Diana, which I really dug this, where for real quick, I liked how, because yeah, as we said earlier, the problem with a lot of times when characters appear in different books is that the writers don't communicate, so you get like drastically different versions. That's why this is significantly like Diana. Where with this one, she's much more confident than she was in John's or Azzarello. So it's like that's again why she feels more like Diana than the other two, because yeah, I mean she's the same age as those two versions, but but in this book she just seems more like she's acting her age, if that makes sense in terms of her maturity.
Exactly. She, from that 18-year-old that we sort of have flashbacks with, or so with John's book, and then to the start of her relationship with Clark, which is at age 23, we actually see that growth from an 18-year-old to a 23-year-old. And that is the character development that we should have, gotten throughout. Um, and again, if we would have gotten that from the beginning, and you had communication with the writers and just basically putting their egos, keeping that at the door. New
But they
52,
can't.
right. New 52 could have had a better, it would have lasted a little bit longer. Yeah, they want these relaunches and initiatives every 2 to 5 years. But again, if something works, especially with Soule's book, and he says it multiple times, that it nothing was wrong with the sales, like at all. They just wanted a supposed different direction out of nowhere. And with that, you basically, that is what's contrived. And that is how you alienate fans, but also just mess up the the books. When you're trying to, honestly, I don't know what you're trying to do, because if you have a book that's already a bestseller and you have the fans there as a support, why would you want to change it?
Well,
There,
because
that's the
guess what?
difference.
I'm going to give you the answer to that, Brett, because too many of these creators, like Mark Waid, like Tomasi, like Jurgens, like, that's not the way it was when I was reading comics. That's why I say at a certain point, you got to filter these guys out, because they keep operating on that mindset that the way comics were when they were a kid. Or it's like, here's the thing. It's like one of the reasons why Kingdom Come was done, according to Mark Waid, was because it's like during the Image Revolution, you have all these like lethal superheroes that are very extreme and such. But it's like, it's the same concept as here, because basically Waid said Kingdom Come was like us telling the audience, you shouldn't want this. And I'm like, you don't get to tell the audience what they want, bro.
Exactly. And the thing is, what they wanted, it doesn't work. That is why they had the reboot in the first place.
And
So
DiGio said that.
it's kind of like, okay, so now you're stuck in this endless loop because you want to force um what you're comfortable with. And the thing is, what makes it bad, and what why they get away with it, is because the fans end up accepting it, and they conform to that way of, we do have to accept the status quo. the traditional status quo,
Yeah.
and without question.
Essentially, essentially, the fans become sheep, and
Yeah,
that's exactly why Brit and I are like, yep, yeah, we're
I
not going to be sheep. We're not going to be sheep.
right. I could remember when actually we are, as Super Wonder fans, apparently we are the black sheep, which isn't a bad thing because we stand
That's
out.
the nicest thing anyone's ever called us. I gotta be
So
honest. I'm like, considering all the crap Brit and I've been called because we're Super Wonder fans, that's actually pretty tame.
right, and not only that, but of course, yeah, I'm going to go ahead and have an anime reference, but there was um an anime that the main character, he was the black sheep of his family, but he was the main one who basically had the special abilities and the one that stood out and the one who saved his family. To tie that in with the New 52 and with Super Wonder, basically, Super Wonder was a bestseller. Their relationship was popular to bring in new fans. It was a part of the New 52 initiative, which overall saved the comic industry and saved DC from being, the comic division from being shut down. So, yeah, I would definitely would use that analogy as a black sheep um, than to be just a sheep that follows in line mindlessly.
Oh, and by the
And
way, these black sheep started a hashtag campaign, so suck it.
right, that too. So
I
yeah,
had to.
is I know. And honestly, you have to keep doing it because it needs to be known that, and I said this before we started recording as well, as you as a Snyder fan and as a Super Wonder fan, and you are very much a Wonder Woman fan first and foremost. And to start a hashtag to help push for Wonder Woman's respect, Rebirth, it was veiled in, like I said, mean-spirited spitefulness of this post-crisis writer coming in and saving the character. But yet he actually made it worse, you know, because Diana being put in a straitjacket, you allowed her to be used as a mouthpiece for another status quo, and you also had her be guilt tripped and lose herself and everything that she was basically fighting for and actually wanted, which was her mother. Even if you were to say that the New 52 Island um, was fake. Diana wanted her mother. She didn't want a relationship with Steve or anything like that. So, and that was only for synergy from the movie.
Yeah, because I was about
So,
to say, if you wanted post-crisis Wonder Woman wasn't in a relationship with Steve.
exactly. It was more mother and daughter um dominated. And that that you are fighting for that. We both of us, but mostly, you with starting a hashtag, and for Super Wonder fans to continue to um, be demonized or ostracized for the ship when, again, the ship has been for decades, first of all. The dynamic itself and what we constantly explain as to what it is. It's nothing as other ships, which basically has one character uh, thrown under the bus for the other to be propped up. It's about them actually being respected equals, and to have that perspective as outsiders and understanding each other and being that partnership, being in a partnership that is born out of a friendship, being best friends and leading to more. That is so much better than just, oh, they should be together because that's always been that way because of tradition and this certain character has the role of a love interest. No, that's very empty and very basic.
Yeah,
Um,
exactly.
but you started this to to take away that idea that Diana can be used as a mouthpiece, that Diana can be, just easily uh, characterized as this warrior woman, that she's codependent on Steve, um, that you're trying to prevent her from becoming like female Superman, that, like I said, she's codependent on Steve, her humanity being in question, that
Yeah,
people
it's to show
obviously.
DC. It's show DC that people care about her.
Right. So again, for a Snyder fan plus a Super Wonder fan to start that hashtag in respect for Wonder Woman
Yeah,
says a lot.
yeah. And by the way, so as a Snyder and Superman fan, I am a black squared sheep. That's what I am. That's what I am. I'm black, a little too above black, sheep. That's me. That's me. Oh, I hate Lois. Cubed, black cubed.
Wow. Well, yeah, Jared, you
I
are
would say I
very.
hate Steve, but literally, it's kind of funny, Britt. When I set, so I made the Lois is worthless video, as you know, that was my first
Yeah.
encounter with toxicity. But the next video I did was Steve is worthless, and the number one response, I didn't get nearly as much hate, and most of the responses were, "Yeah, he kind of sucks."
Right. You.
That was the funniest part about this. And I'm like, oh yeah, no one gives a crap about Steve.
Yeah. And again, for you to, I mean, Lois was basically in the same boat, and she still is. Um, it's more so because she is a female character, and the way the Lois fans glorify her, and she is pushed in a sense of these writers who think that, you know, basically what Williamson did with giving her powers, but it was very much fluff, you know, or Jurgens trying to push this narrative that Lois is the co-star of the equal co-star of Superman, when honestly she's just a glorified supporting
And she
character.
wasn't in his run of Superman.
Yeah, and also just that Clark needs Lois to be Superman. That kind of
Considering in the origin story that you all love, the Byrne origin story, he was Superman before he met Lois. He had the costume and everything.
right. So you know, that's basically what some of these fans are trying to do to Diana with Steve because of the influence of DCEU. How Diana was pitiful, and spending 100 years just because of a guy she only met for a week. That really was going overboard, and that was not
Exactly.
love. Diana
Mhm.
hadn't had a real relationship before. It was more so of the young girl infatuation and curiosity. That was not love. And I really, if you are having these characters, knowing the influence that they have, you should not write them in that way. You
Exactly.
need to write them in consideration that, yeah, it is even some adults that read them take cues still from these characters, and they will take that literally. I mean, we see it all the time of how
Oh yeah.
these fans that are even middle age use those certain examples to say, yeah, Clark and Diana is from an island, so that means she doesn't have a connection to humanity, when again the Amazons are human. That
And they
is
even had
her.
a mirror that connected them to man's world. So
Or that Diana, she loves culture. She loves to celebrate culture.
I mean,
And that
hell,
is her.
in the Charles Soule book, she literally says she literally says she likes to try food from literally everywhere.
Exactly. If she did not have any type of connection to humanity, she wouldn't be as she was. Um, in issue 7, when the bouncer from the club says she comes here, to listen to the music, to dance and everything, she doesn't have a guy with her. but still, Diana loves the music. Diana loves to dance. She is written by Soule as your average, in a sense, your average 23-year-old woman,
And
young woman.
then here's the thing. All right, on that scene real quick, the other thing I really love about that scene is when Floyd goes, the woman's a goddess, and then Superman goes, you have no idea how accurate that is. But
Exactly.
so now I will say this: the other thing, when Soule writes Warrior Diana, because again he gets the balance. So we talked about the peaceful Diana. Good Lord, is she badass in this? But she fights Doomsday, and yeah, she gets her arm broken stuff, but she breaks stuff off of him. Look at this.
Right. She knows, with Soule, she knows when it's time to be brutal. And
Yeah.
with
In fact, this is probably one of those times where Jeff was referencing, if it comes down to that, I will resort to this.
and it's okay, monsters, and we've talked about this because uh when we've talked about Medusa in that sense as a monster, or seen as a monster, that is a very complicated situation. But a mindless monster like Doomsday, yeah, cut his head off, you know?
Well, you also run into this with the Batman fandom when I made content about Batman kills parademons all the time, and they're like, "Yeah, but they're not alive." I'm like, "No, you didn't say alive. You said he never kills. You didn't say alive."
Right,
That's where you catch people, because you're like, be very careful on the phrasing, because if you say never kills and end the sentence there, I'm like, no, including Diana, and in that case, monsters do count. I'm like, if you said she doesn't kill non-monsters, then you have something. It's just when people say like they don't kill, period, and they go, well, I meant this. I'm like, no, you didn't. You mean you what it really means when they say, well, I meant this, is that I have no response because I have no argument. That's what that is.
yeah. And then they want to, either, if you're having a Twitter battle, you have the
I've done that.
endless, yeah, you have the endless goal posting, or it is where they say something totally out of line and then act like the victim and block you, when you've given factual information. But yeah, this Diana, even post crisis Diana, she would make the sacrifice, and again, we saw in Sacrifice, literally, the story, that she had no other option. And post crisis Clark, he's killed too. He killed willingly, and then they actually tried to give him, um, some inner conflict with that he regretted it, but it's something that he had to do,
Yeah,
you know.
exactly. They did there's an entire omnibus that collects the period where he left Earth because he killed, and it's called Exile.
The thing is, these characters can kill,
Oh yeah.
and they shouldn't be limited not to. If you can have, the double standard is that you can have these characters unhealthily emotionally attached to love interests and basically turn them evil if the love interest dies or something like that, or have Diana, currently, she does not care for her sisters who were murdered, who were trafficked and in prison, taken away. You know, that's another thing that comes up. Diana knew that some of the Amazons that lived in man's world, they had families, they had children, daughters, and we don't see her.
Oh yeah.
Yeah,
Oh my gosh. You know what's kind of funny? I betcha that on that, it's just King forgot.
true, probably,
That's
but
what I think, because that happens with writers where like they start these plot points that they really should address, but they're like, oh yeah, that's true, I forgot about that. And I'm like, well, that just makes you a crappy writer. But
that
yeah, go ahead.
Oh, I was gonna say that, but he was also more concerned about Steve. So whether
Well,
he
well,
forgot
yeah.
or
Remember, oh mother, here's the man that has killed my beloved. instead of here's the man that's killed so many of our sisters. If he had just put my beloved and so many of our sisters, I would have had less of an issue with that.
Honestly, I still have an issue with it
Well, I
because
know you would have. Okay. No, but it's like, no, but at least then she would be thinking of her sisters.
true, true. I would have still had issues because you don't name Steve first. First of all,
Well,
he
yeah.
shouldn't be
But
named
by
at
the way,
all.
everyone, if you think I'm hypercritical at DC, meet this lady right here.
Yeah, I try to be positive, but that goes out the window real quick,
Well, when
real
you're talking
quick.
about Tom King, it's literally impossible to be positive.
Exactly. So yeah, you have this Diana where she will. I loved in issue 11 when Clark tells Diana he's like she is going into the Phantom Zone and she's making that sacrifice. And Clark is like, don't do it. And he says, you saved me, but let me save you. And everyone else. And Diana says, race you. That playfulness that they have and just that they know the importance of their jobs, but at the same time, they make it, or at least Diana, made it as lighthearted as she could, knowing the weight of um, the crisis that they're going through. We have even Crisis, the animated movie, where this that was the only time that I will allow and accept Immortal Wonder Woman. And also Immortal Wonder Woman, the comic book
Yeah.
that is present day Diana being born in present day, and then she until lives until the end of time. That is fine. But having a Crisis or Tomorrow versus Wonder Woman um, from World War II and Clark too, having them be still seem young physically, but emotionally and mentally they are very old.
Mm-hmm.
But you feel that she is that a warrior, but she also has so much heart, and that pretty much
Yes.
connects.
Speaking of heart,
Um,
here you go.
we have that connection with New 52 Wonder Woman. Is that
Exactly. And here's the thing that I want to say real quick. What this one Wonder Woman did, particularly in the Soule run, is yes, she was a warrior, but on a dime, she could shut it off and turn into essentially okay. She can turn off the warrior and become and go back to being the woman on a dime.
right? And also the ambassador of peace.
Well, yeah.
That that is what's also overall missing from the New 52 is that we don't have Diana that has that sort of connection. If you want to force if you want to force her to be so aligned with the government and stuff, she should have been able to become the ambassador. Even Rucka with Rebirth, you had that in your first run. Why wasn't that your priority to put Diana back as the ambassador of Themyscira or an ambassador period? No, instead, again being mean spirited, you made this about ships. And at some point, ships are not the end all be all. It's all about the character. And for
Mhm.
us, for it, even with overall of this channel or of Super Wonder Legacy, we talk more about Diana because we see more of her potential that is not tapped into.
Well, it's
With
because no one talks about it. Hell, that's why I do Wonder Woman Wednesdays.
right with Clark, I mean, he is very much watered down to the point of is basically giving up. I mean, both of them are watered down, but it's really that
Well, here's the thing.
it,
Clark does not have a current blatantly offensive book being published.
no, it's just boring and kind of
Hmm.
like you can't have any stakes because
Yeah.
you have to have Superman. And Wade said this. Basically, he can't have conflict. Like it has to be resolved in the end, have that happy-go-lucky, type ending. And that is Wade's criticism of Kingdom Come too, is that he thinks that Kingdom Come Superman failed because of the tragedy that happened. And it's kind of like, no, you can't do that. You can't have it that Superman saves everyone every time. You can't do that. So he's just the perfect hero. There's never been nowhere, in on Earth there shouldn't be any crime then if Superman saves everyone. If he is just able to um, just be emotionally just happy all the time. He has to go through things. He has to have conflict. If you make these characters that much of Mary and Gary Stews, then the the fans, they can't invest in the character. They can't root for the character. So with Clark, the way they want him to be this very watered down version of Beacon of Hope and having this conservative nuclear family. I mean, unless it's something like absolute Superman, mainline Superman, we won't have that sort of depth of the character. But with
Exactly.
Wonder Woman, I think that we have a little bit more room to sort of push as fans to get her the balance that we believe that she should have.
Exactly. So going to speaking of depth, so you have the themes here. What where the series is like based upon like is like essentially like well actually if I could have one word to summarize it is just identity because it deals with because Wonder Woman is like he hides part of his identity. I don't know if I can do that. And then Clark is like, I'm not sure if I can be so open. It's like they both encourage each other in that way to embrace different parts of identity, and they both face each other's identity, like with them fighting Zod or Clark absolutely bodying Apollo.
You
Uh,
love
uh,
that scene. I know.
that's my favorite scene, and I've said it before. That's my favorite Superman moment to ever be in a comic book.
Right. And yeah, it is about identity and just emotionally maturing and growing as individuals and as a couple. And the thing is, just overall with this, the fact that that was pushed aside and ignored and belittled, again, for traditional relationships that far more immature. The way that they handle these traditional relationships, and yeah, I am talking about Lois and Steve specifically and only because you, if there's a way, these editors feel like that is the only way. Anything else is kind of like they can't put the effort in. So any conflict, like I said, it has to be easily resolved, glossed over, um, or ignored. King did the same thing. He used, well, Jurgens, Rucka, Tomasi, King, same, basically all of the same way. Um, using Diana as a mouthpiece, using King used Sovereign as a mouthpiece to say that Wonder Woman and Steve Trevor should always be together, or that's just the way it's supposed to be. He said even his daughter questioned like why is she with him, and he couldn't answer the question. It was just basically, I don't even think he answered the question. It was just more so like
hmm
it's always been that way. So Diana is just with him because that's who she loves. But you don't really get that in-depth um answer and a solid answer. That's the same thing with Clois. Clois is very much codependency, especially with Clark. Um, with him, what James Gunn said of Clark being in love with Lois because he needs her. to, in a sense, make him feel normal, quote unquote. Um, and we see that in the comics of, you know, him basically the mental gymnastics of, in order for him to feel human, he has to be with a human love interest instead of embracing his his otherness and his alienness. And what he said to Diana in Throne of Atlantis, the animated movie, was blending in. And with blending in reality, we are all blending in. We are all from different cultures, different backgrounds, different families, and everything like that. But we blend in to make the world what it is. So, why is it that these characters that's supposed to represent diversity can't? Why is it that they have to um, basically be the total opposite of what they are supposed to represent?
Because writers don't know how to do that, and it's like it's that.
True.
Well, yeah, and then we get to this. It's like this is why again, I love this panel because I love the Hal part because it harkens back to Justice League where Green Lantern's like, he goes, "Man's got no respect for dibs."
Right. That that
I just
honestly
love
was
that.
funny. That
And
was
I
funny.
go, and I love Barry going, respect's probably why she's with him, Hal. I'm like,
Right.
true, true, true. And I love Apollo watching there from the little pool. And I can imagine he kind of flinches when he sees like Clark now because Clark could throw him through a volcano. But anyway, but it's like the thing about this is why I always recommend this book to people because this book, if you didn't like Clark and Diana in their individual books, fine. This one puts them because they act like regular Superman and Wonder Woman, except I mean regular is not exactly the right word. It's more like the classic Superman and Wonder Woman. The only difference is who they're dating.
Exactly. And I mean, honestly, if you see post crisis, they
Well, post
had,
crisis Superman was more of an a-hole than New 52 is.
yeah, and he was just as old as he's supposed to be. He was definitely immature, you know. Um and New 52 Superman, without having the Kents, he learned to be more of, honestly, that man of action that he's supposed to be. He wasn't spoon fed. He wasn't. He had to actually go through things. He was a little bit immature again with um. Well, it wasn't immaturity. It was more so of just that doubt that he wanted to. He's so used to saving people and so used to being that, protector, that he thought that Diana needed his protecting just as well. And while, yes, sometimes she does, it's not as strenuous as he would, as any other iteration being with Lois or um, just being the protector of the world. Diana is the one that she can protect him, but also she can protect herself, when
Exactly.
and only on very rare occasions does she need him to protect her.
Yeah, exactly. So then you get, real quick on that. I love that scene. Again, the reason why I love that Apollo scene so much is also what comes out afterwards when Clark goes, "Before you say anything, I know you could have handled it." And she goes, "That's true, but it was fun to watch." So I really like that. So tell us
Right.
about the evolution of the character.
Okay. So what we could have had, um, again, is all about. It's like they had the elements there. It was just the execution,
Hmm.
really they fumbled it.
Hmm.
But if whether you have Soule still on Superman and Wonder Woman, or you let him, take over Wonder Woman solo,
Hmm.
we see that he understood that even though Diana was the god, or the goddess of war, she is still the embodiment of peace. And in issue 7, um, Clark was saying how cool it was for her to be the goddess of war.
I know, and then
And
Tomasi comes on and he goes, "Why didn't you tell me?"
right, just very stupid. But you have where Diana explains to him that she wanted to just understand war, to either have it stop completely, like basically non-existent,
Mhm.
or is to, if there is to be a war, it's like the very last option.
Yeah, exactly.
And that's the
It's like
same
how
thing.
Diana. It's essentially, in many ways, it's like what Jeff Johns was saying, where it's like, if it comes down to it.
Right. So with with um bringing back Diana as an ambassador and a diplomat, if this was set after Azzarello's run, when the Amazons are turned back to normal,
Hmm.
and Diana would become that ambassador of Themyscira, and she would still continue on her mission to bridge, you know, open up certain things of Themyscira, as it was set in post crisis, and to man's world, and her being the educator, and the and just that figure of peace, and um as she was in, I think it was issue 4, when she spoke to the girls in Hesia's karate class,
Hmm.
and we needed more of that as well. And again, it all comes, what's so funny is that all of Diana's good moments, that you see her as the character that she was supposed to be, is ironically in the Superman and Wonder Woman book. That is quite ironic. But yeah, with her also just being the voice of the people as she wanted to be, and not be undercut. Just because Diana is showing some authority, or she's showing that leadership that she should always show, um, it intimidates writers, and that is what Tomasi said. And she needs to be humbled. And how do they humble her? They make it seem like, you know, the narrative around her is that she's one step closer to being evil, or she's the devil on Clark's shoulder telling him to basically take over the world. But no, when you see Diana, and I've also explained this even with Kingdom Come version of Diana, how she was the older version that saw a realistic, set in a realistic world that needed guidance. Clark and Diana are supposed to be the guides. They're supposed to be the guides of, multiple worlds, but mostly of their own culture, Kryptonian and Amazon, um, Amazonian, to man's world. And once they start there, they expand. So that is, I would say, that is another thing that really should have been emphasized, especially when New 52 Diana did have the Diana Prince um, identity, and we saw in the animation that Clark said that she was a diplomat. So it was just certain things. Again, you have it there, but they did nothing with it. They didn't expand as how we expected to.
Exactly. And that goes for the identity too, because I would have liked if they played more, because they did play partly on it, but maybe like when his identity was like revealed with Lois. See, if I were writing this of Tomasi, I would have had it where Diana helps him open up. She says that this is the opportunity now, Cal. You can now essentially fully embrace who you are, and she helps give him like the more positive view of having a public identity.
Exactly. And like we've constantly said, Clark having the blog with Kat, and him, he's not stuck. or limited to Metropolis or the Daily Planet. He left the Daily Planet because he saw the corruption, of the news and everything. So he wanted to create his own, and that is to be an independent writer or news correspondent. You know, especially in this world of social media, how it's so fast that people can get news and they can tweet it out, in a matter of seconds, and it spread like wildfire. Instead of um, Clark being limited to a newspaper that is still in print, or they're trying to use the idea of social media, but you basically have, again, that hello fellow kids meme of writers who really don't understand how to modernize the Daily Planet in that
Yeah,
sense. Yeah, they
exactly.
have
Because
computers.
again, they want it to be the way it was when they were kids.
Right, and it definitely feels like the 70s still, or the early 90s. So like we said, you have the ambassador, Diana Prince, and you have the reporter, Clark Kent. Their jobs basically go hand in hand. Diana uses her voice to speak on injustices and for the people and helping women and children. Clark, he brings the story out with his words. The new actually using, like I said, whether his own blog or the blog he has, the website he has with Kat, is still the news and the facts coming out and giving the people still that voice by word. So that goes hand in hand. And um, again, that is something that could have been written a little bit more, and I'm pretty sure Soule would have done so.
Yeah, I
To
think he would have.
Yeah,
Well, because here's the thing, because Soul is a good enough writer to not leave that stuff hanging.
right, just to balance it out, that um, the identity out of the costume is still important, um, just as important, and it's not. Again, it's not so much as making them alienated, and that's how they become even more ingrained within humanity because of their jobs, outside of the costume.
Hmm.
And it's, if you want to say, it's the classic way, but with that new depth of it, because
Exactly.
you are really emphasizing on Clark and Diana's perspective of those outsiders. So you have basically these two powerful, quote unquote, immigrants as an ambassador and a reporter, basically like letting the truth be known of the world. That is a very powerful story and could be something that really stands out. But DC isn't creative enough
Oh
to
yeah.
let that be well executed.
So tell me, Britt, how do we build a legacy, almost like a Super Wonder legacy? I had to.
I love that. So again, you have Diana, that she is, especially with Hesia, um, she's an older Amazon that's pretty much a guide, and Diana is still all about sisterhood, and she is still inspired by, the love for and of her mother, that she wants that back. So she is still helping women and children, specifically young women, with how Heshia has the defense classes and everything like that. And she is still going take what um, John's, you know, tried to undercut with Batman, saying that it would have been taken out of context with her, and really show that Diana, as Diana Prince or as Wonder Woman, she is helping in third world countries, and that she is speaking out too within those countries about people and showing her rebuild. It's not just her fighting the monsters or the corrupted, supervillains, it also her helping rebuild and for that step by step of cultures coming together. So she is also learning, and that's something that she wanted to do. So you're putting all of that together that, as I said, is put out there, but the dots just were never connected. Um, and then you have Clark, and we love the idea that he documents everything as like he's basically like her human diary
Yeah,
because she's
that's kind of true because he does have a perfect memory.
and he's the one that she's more open to you know speak on her own feelings and just be open to everything that she wants to do. So that is and also it goes ties into his own um job as a reporter too. Then you also have the gods. They are still dysfunctional as ever. However, you have a little bit more of them, I guess, calming down with the dysfunctionalness.
Well,
And
I would imagine a few of them are like the last time Apollo messed with them, he got kicked through a volcano by her boyfriend.
right, so it's kind of like like I said, they've calmed down a little bit and are more helpful, I would say, for Diana. And um, then you the have them actually deal with the U.S. government and the
Mhm.
corruption, with Lex or Amanda. Um, have
I
Clark and
got
Diana
it.
use that.
Clark and Diana directly dismantle Argus.
Oh, so
So they can basically say, hey, they were building a Justice League to kill us.
that is perfect. Exactly. Yeah,
Yeah,
love that
and
idea.
then Batman and Oracle help expose Amanda Waller, so they literally take down Argus.
That is a perfect story. That should have been
Plus, it's
um
even more sweet considering Steve works for
Steve works
Argus.
there. Exactly.
So then we get to okay. So how are we gonna fix and fix is kind of a strong word because it's not necessarily like anything about her is directly broken. I kind of count it more of a tweaking, if you know my drift. It's just
Well,
tweaking.
Well, that is why fix is in quotes
Yeah.
because it, again, it's not so much as fixing her because the elements are there.
Hmm.
It is very much there. It's just how to connect it as it was and yeah, to connect everything and just make it more cohesive and just and balancing it all out.
Yeah.
So
Exactly.
um with this, it just again, everything that within the story is some things, of course, we will take out, just period, because it it it, it depends. If it really like the Amazons, and as I said earlier, if you want the Amazons to have that realism of tainted, in a sense, just have them misguided out of retaliation and basically victims who wants revenge and to know that that is not the way of the Amazons.
Yeah. Exactly.
And Diana guides them in that sense that no, this is how the Amazons are and this is why we are on this island in the first place, and basically remind them of who they are and what their purpose is. And that's how you pretty much, like I said, it is bad, but at the same time there is a story there that could be told and that you can smooth it over just a little bit. um
Exactly.
with
And
the gods,
yeah, go ahead.
with the gods and Zeus, the Zeus origin, again, that whole tie, Diana does have ties with the gods. Um, Either way you basically slice it for them. Uh, However, it's more so because she's such a, yes, she is one of the many billions of spawns of Zeus. We know that. However, she is the one that stands out because of her uniqueness to how her spirit,
Well,
basically.
not only that, how great would it be if they did an arc where Diana like had to team up with the other spawns of Zeus, like actually do it?
That would have been, again, something that, I mean,
But
even if she did have to like fight, some of them, but they will still be guided by her, though, because
exactly,
a lot of them in mythology, they are that selfish and uh, and tainted with a lot of the dysfunction, pretty much inherited by Zeus. But Diana is the one that is the most, if not, completely of pure heart and of pure intent and a pure spirit. And that is, again, why she stands out.
exactly. So, real quick, before we transition to Ixing Azzarello, I just want to say I want to comment on the costume because we haven't talked about her costume. And the thing is, I like it. It's simple enough, but I like the update of the silver, and it's kind of interesting. I told this to Brit before we started recording, but so for Superman Day, I picked up the first issue of the Jimmy Olsen Super Cyclopedia. Man, that is a mouthful. And the entry they have for Wonder Woman, it's literally New 52 Wonder Woman with pants.
Yeah, I like the bodysuit. It's fine, but also the pants is fine too. I wouldn't be surprised if this is actually the costume that she ends up having in live action DCU. It's That's not the bathing suit,
Oh, that
especially.
will piss people off, but rightly so.
I mean, yeah, rightly so, because the the thing is with live action, it's just you need to take in consideration to the comfort of the actress. So having her with pants, she can still have the bustier type thing, but having pants will just be a little bit more comfortable and make sense instead of just having this expectation, especially because of fanboys, of sexualizing her. And Diana, at this moment of so many fans just labeling her as this BDSM sexualized warrior woman, cold-hearted warrior woman. No, she doesn't need that.
Yeah,
So
exactly.
if you give her a costume live action, it needs to be with pants and not the linebacker look from the Finches, with the shoulder
We'll
pads.
talk
Not that.
about that. The linebacker. Oh my god.
Not that, or the Wolverine blade. She doesn't need that. Just pants is just fine.
I love how you call it the linebacker suit. So anyway, back to Azzarello. So the things that I think really have to be fixed is, for one thing, in terms of the Amazons. If I could redo this, wouldn't do they seduce people to reproduce. Don't do that. And honestly, for this story, if we're gonna keep a lot of this story, keep the Zeus origin.
Right. Yeah. I mean, again, it's giving a lot more drama, and they wanted to go with realism and the popularity of mythology. Obviously, the Disneyfication of mythology is not, that wouldn't work.
Mm-hmm.
Making the gods Disney animals, Orca, that does not work.
Yeah,
Um,
she looked a little too much like Snow White.
yeah, making even making Zeus. I would say it depends, but now he's like the fit Santa Claus look.
Mm-hmm.
Um, no, having that, yeah, it is some criticism on some of the designs, but having Zeus,
Oh,
the
Zeus is not one
dreads,
of Zeus is peak. That's why I put him on the thumbnail.
that is like, it's kind of like, who is that? That having him with dreads,
The image of him holding Diana, he's got like thunder in his eyes. I'm like, oh.
wow, yes. Um, just that whole thing though, that you keep because you can make it work, even though it does go against the purity of the clay origin and what it means as, but it's still Hippolyta's story because she was desperate wanting a child. And you can actually combine them. And I think that is pretty much what they did. To say that uh, Hippolyta, she wanted a child. She did mold a child of clay, and or well, when she was on the shores of the mascara, and that child she dreamed of. Zeus saw that as an opportunity because that's what he does, and she had an affair with him, and that is something
So,
that
so,
she
so,
had to.
so, what you're telling me, Britt, is that he laid his seed, as you so eloquently put it.
Yeah, and yeah, because he felt like he was doing, well, he felt like it was his duty in a sense, um, because he's just that conceited,
Mm-hmm.
as the king of the gods, and then also seeing Hippolyta as the queen of the Amazons, so he felt of it in a vain type way of having this child, whether it, you know, a daughter who is of basically truly of divine royalty. So it is very complex still because you still have that mother daughter story that's told. You have a deadbeat dad, um, and you with Diana, she's still the outsider and everything like that. You just flip it to a more darker, realistic situation where the Amazons are not as accepting of Diana as they usually are.
Mm-hmm.
And again, that is something that gives her those types of emotions that she does learn a little bit early instead of she's and yeah, it does take away the idea of paradise, but at the same time, you can also put that as it's kind of like an illusion itself, you
Mm-hmm.
know, that the island was supposed to be of paradise where these women who have been um, wronged over the centuries, they find refuge, they find this place of peace. But Zeus, being a conceited man, of course, he comes and he uh, tanked, basically the island. And not only that, but it's with the queen in a sense. So that is another part of building that twisted drama. And Diana being the result of that, she is, like I said, not so easily accepted, but because the Amazons need that redemption and because Diana is the key to that, she slowly shows her sisters to basically let go of their skepticism of her and just their unruliness um, and resentment for men, and that it's not the same as what it was. And there are way more peaceful methods than stooping so low to what the men did in that
Mm-hmm.
sense of, and that's how you can break that cycle of brutality.
Yeah,
And
exactly.
and again, you are slowly building to the Amazons that are a little bit recognizable.
Yeah, exactly. So in other words, you could have Diana be that beacon, essentially, that she is
Exactly.
really supposed to be as the princess, as like their champion, if you will, because that's what she is when she leaves the island. She becomes the Amazonian champion. That's what she's supposed to be.
Right.
So
So,
yeah, go ahead.
oh, I was gonna say, so it's not so much as male dominance. I don't want to get that misconstrued as Diana teaching the Amazons to forgive men. No, 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 no. I'm saying basically that they just can't go out and it, their retaliation of doing exactly what the men did, um, is that's not the answer. So she's basically teaching them just again the other methods. And
Don't do eye for an eye, in other words.
yes, and Diana is it's really just flipping, what she's always been, but at the same time it still aligns. So yeah, it's just Diana always being what she is as the educator and the that beacon.
Yeah, exactly. So then we get to the other one, Meredith Finch. By the way, so when we get to the costume, I had a conversation with David Finch about that costume when I was at a con once, so I'll be able to give you a little bit more interior interior information on it.
Right. Um, so I would say with this, from jump, I've given Meredith slack because this was definitely editorial driven.
Oh yeah.
And she she gave Diana the emotional upheaval. She had nightmares of being the god of war. She was still longing for her mother. She wanted to balance. Now she was basically queen of the mascara. She was trying to balance that out as well as try to balance her role in the Justice League. So it was a lot of emotional upheaval that she was going through. And um it was just that again, it made it seem like Diana was whiny a little bit, or she was overly like overly emotional at some points. But for what it was, she responded as she should, but it was just a little bit too much. And
Mm-hmm.
then on top of that, with having the Amazon, well, with having the Amazons create Donna as a rival to
Yeah,
Diana,
I that's the part that I don't like.
yeah, that, and then for Donna to lead the other Amazons to killing the male Amazons that Diana, you know, she accepted and that she wanted to protect, that really, it just, it really didn't make sense to me. And it just seemed like, you wanted shock value, but you are throwing tons of characters under the bus for this, and it wasn't worth it. And it was, it just, yeah, it went too far. But again, I don't blame Meredith for this because, again, with the shock value that DC was trying to garner, going into DC while you trying to create drama for Clark and Diana's relationship and all of that, it again, it was too much, and I just don't blame the Finch for that. Now,
Exactly.
who I do blame, of course, because he was gleefully happy to do so, was Tomasi. And so anything that's flawed and overly antagonistic there, I that was all him. And that's why we pretty much don't reference that side. I would say that with knowing the editorial, really just screwed over Meredith. I wouldn't mind her, not as a complete run, but maybe like a one shot or a mini series to really see what she can do for Diana on her own, having full, creative freedom instead of being editorial driven.
Yeah, exactly. So, okay, here's what I want to say about the costume. Because I asked him that. By the way, he signed my trade that has the costume on it. So I asked him, what was the thought process or what inspired the costume change? And he basically told me that it was DC editorial saying they wanted a costume that covered her up.
Uh, mm, Again, unnecessary changes.
No, I
Just
know that, but I'm like, even on that, it's like, again, speaking of editorial, this wasn't like, hey, let's give her a new costume.
no, they wanted her to look like a linebacker. I mean, you don't her her shoulders were already covered up, with the long sleeves. So I'm not sure why she even had to have the um pads, anyway. That just really, if she didn't have those, I think the costume would have worked. And also the loincloth type, whatever that is, those had to go too.
Yeah, I wasn't a big fan of that, but I did like the color design and like a lot. See, here's the thing: a fully covered Wonder Woman can work. It's just the other accoutrements that really have an issue because I like the color of like the gold, red, and black. I think that actually works really well, and I think that was like they were trying to homage like the more classic red and gold look for Wonder Woman. So the Wolverine arm blades is like I'm like she has a sword and a shield. What does she need Wolverine arm blades?
Right. The color is wonderful. If she would have take those off, and honestly, I wish someone could redesign it. Taking off the shoulder pads and the loincloth things to really see the potential of what this costume would have looked like. And I guarantee you it would have been so much better.
But the funny part is that what he said to me is that the backlash was so severe that that's why she only has that costume for a couple of issues.
It was, I mean, the intention, if it was to cover her up, and that goes back to just the whole thing about being too sexy or risque. But the thing is, Diana isn't meant to be covered up. She is supposed to be liberated, and she is, supposed to represent femininity in um, you know, in celebration of that and loving how you look. So to cover her up for whatever reason, that's probably just as dumb.
Don't tell
It was
DC that.
unnecessary. DCU are dumb.
Yeah, exactly. But I'm like, yeah, it doesn't need. Now, here's the thing. Again, that type of costume for Wonder Woman can work 110%. The problem is, it's like when if the costume were better designed. So that's the first thing I would do. If I have to stick with the costume change, get rid of the shoulder pads and Wolverine arm blades and the loincloth, I think you're fine. If you take out those
Right.
elements, but keep the rest of the costume, I think it kind of works.
Exactly.
In terms of everything else, do not do the Donna thing.
Right.
Like,
Have
have Charles do his idea, but do not do the. She was made from the clay of Hippolyta. Wouldn't that just make her Hippolyta? And to be an agent to kill Diana, and she later ends up leading the Amazons to murder the sons of Themyscira.
right.
By the way,
That
Brit, I love how that's the marketing image that they picked for Paradise Lost for the DCU. I'm like, do you realize the context around what's happening in that image?
no, no, they don't. And that's the thing. Well, no, no, no. Actually, they do because what Saffron and Gunn said was first of all, the title is Paradise Lost, and it was supposed to be some type of civil war on Themyscira, and it's supposed to be have the tone of Game of Thrones, and it's just like no, no. I mean, for so long, as we've said, the Amazons being dark, it can work, but we would definitely rather have the Perez version,
Mm-hmm.
with, or you can have like a 75-25 or something like that,
Mm-hmm.
Um, have them more like Perez, but that rest of the 25%, you can put them in a dark situation. But to actually base that around New 52 of the Amazons being that brutal and just like killing unprovoked, no, no, that's not the image that you should have for Wonder Woman. No.
Absolutely not. Exactly. Because here's what I would do. I would have Diana start reconciling the Amazons with the Sons of Themyscira and later turn them into one people.
Yeah,
Because that's what she's supposed to do.
right.
That's her role. That when they sent her to be an ambassador, but yes, I agree, restore her ambassador role. She's there to link Themyscira to the outside world. That's the other thing I would do. Definitely, like bring back, have her start the embassy, and Clark becomes her press secretary.
Yes, let Clark be the secretary for once.
Oh
And
yeah, oh
also
yeah. I just realized. You're right. Let
let
him
him
do
be the secretary. That would be so, honestly, that is perfect, Jared. But also bring back the Wonder Dome. You know,
Yes.
that is something too. I it's again, it's so many ideas, and whether it is pulling from post crisis, or just as you said, not fixing the 52, but just touching up, cutting off, whether it's cutting off the fat or just smoothing out the hard edges of the new 52. This honestly could have worked. And it could have been a very long, not drawn out, boring, but just a long story that really could have, you know, it it could have been when people asked, does Wonder Woman have like a story? Honestly, All Star Superman is a little overrated to me, but
Okay, so here's the thing, and Robert and I have talked about this. Because I see people recommending giving All-Star Superman to people for like their first Superman book. No, because that's like Superman at the end. My friend William from the Sci-Fi Center actually recommended you give them Kingdom Come because of what that like does for Superman. But I technically wouldn't. I would just give someone the first volume of Action Comics
Action
by Grant.
Comics. Exactly. So, I'm trying to think of a story.
For
What
Wonder Woman,
Action
I would
Comics
just give them Gods and Mortals by
Mortals?
Perez.
Exactly. But people ask, does she have like a? People use All Star Superman, even though I think it's overrated. But they say, All Star Superman or Death of Superman. Does she have those types of iconic
Well,
stories?
remember, according to Mark Millar, she almost did.
Well, no, we are throwing that
I
into
had
in
to. I
hellfire.
had to.
Um,
Well, you could kind of say, well, here's the thing. One of the stories she's known for, Amazon's attack, is not exactly held in high regard.
no, definitely not. I would say if it was to be,
How about Paradise Lost, the
I
comic?
mean, it it can be, in spurts, if promoted, in a sense, Spirit of Truth could work.
Hmm.
League of One could work. Uh, well, only those two really, and Gods and
And
Mortals from.
honestly, if I'm talking about Wonder Woman, power couple.
Well, yeah, yeah, and her secretary, yeah, that works. But just Diana needs a story that just elevates her
Mm-hmm.
to, and yes, you have absolute Wonder Woman, but I mean mainline Diana to
Yeah,
really
yeah, I
elevate
know. And
her.
Lord knows the Sovereign ain't elevating Diana.
Right. If you wanted to use the Sovereign to elevate her, she would have been, wasn't because of Steve, but from the second issue of knowing that what was going on with her sisters, she would have been, you know, throwing, she would have had bodies for
Well,
sure.
here's what you do. Here's what I would do. She goes to the Sovereign's base, rips open the window, and goes, "Even your Majesty, would you care to step outside?"
Yeah, she
So
definitely would
I'm
have.
taking the moment from Superman 2 and putting it with Wonder Woman. And she goes,
Yeah,
"Oh yeah, you're the guy that's been killing my sisters, right? Good. At least I know who to punch."
Right. Yeah.
But
Something like that.
but
It
we all know Tom King is incapable of writing a good conclusion.
right. I mean, that was very poor.
Exactly. Now, the other part about this that now, when Brit and I say build more depth with Superman, still respect her autonomy as a character, because that's the other thing that people say about this relationship is that it turns her into Superman's girlfriend. It doesn't, but still, it's like to avoid that. He's a side character in her book, but it's like you still have to like reference the relationship and stuff.
Exactly. It's that is so um crazy and pretty much shows how people aren't reading the books because it has always been that Clark is a support to Diana. He never overshadows her in her own book. He's never there to um like basically what King did have her helpless. If anything, she's Steve's girlfriend, because that is what the plot is revolving around, the glorification of Steve. Then we have even with we've seen Batman fans, think that Wonder Woman is supposed to be the well, to quote them, his girl, his female dog, his the stepmother of Damien and the Robins, just labeling her as the benefit for Batman instead of being that is of her story. And again, we saw that in the latest issue of Wonder Woman with King having Zeus says that they're men, they're gods, and then there's Batman, or however you
Oh yeah,
that
that
was said.
bullshit.
Yeah. So you have these moments where Batman overshadows Wonder Woman. But honestly, Superman never overshadows her. Even when she's in crossed over with his books, she stood out. And that was also one thing that uh, Tomasi referred to with saying that she demanded the spotlight and that it was hard or difficult to balance them out because of that. It was like, no, you aren't supposed to put her in the background in the first place. So, that was a huge red flag to say that she was intimidating because she couldn't be put in the back, or that she demands the spotlight. Of course, she is supposed to, as a female character of empowerment, just because it's easier to um, write Lois as baking pies. Well, just stick to that if that's easier for you. But yeah, and also with having her as a mouthpiece for the status quo of his relationship with Lois, you know, those certain things are very contrived and it's problematic, but it's not the character's relationship though. It's always outside of the relationship and is forced um, due to other preferences and biasness. But within the relationship, if written correctly, you have a balanced, respectful relationship that Diana, as she should, is put into the spotlight.
Yeah, exactly. So then we get to introducing internal and external conflict.
So again, the whole relationship is about perspective. Everything with Diana is about perspective and learning of different things, learning of, just with how to navigate this new world, and what um what is her place? What is she to do just to not only move forward for herself, but also for the world and for the world to follow her into, moving forward. And with Clark, again, the conflicts that they have to be natural. They cannot be contrived, or else you will have one or the other or both as antagonistic and unlikable. And that's what we had to deal with Tomasi, with Diana being this goddess of war, and that's what he emphasized on. And Clark not understanding that, and then Clark written as post-crisis Clark, which was basically a dud. So that really did not match. And as we did for New 52 Superman, as going into the future, of course, thinking hypothetically for a child, um, for them, if you wanted to go with Soule's story, um, and have Donna, instead of her being the rival and a murderer, you could have her as that time displaced daughter. But it's still that she's more aligned with um, Diana. And how you can do that, you really can, in a sense. You can have,
What?
let's see, Donna has so many origins. You
Well,
can
yeah,
you can
I would have
use
just I would have just done if she's not the daughter of Wonder Woman Superman, I would have just done the whole she saves her from a house fire thing.
that and they adopt her.
Yeah.
Or um the one origin that I was thinking of was the mirror origin, that she was a mirror image of Diana. Well,
Oh.
let her be a mirror image of Diana and Clark, that use, I think her name was Magala, use Magala, and she, I don't know, have it where Clark and Diana are somewhere and she appears, she has mirrors, and she somehow, or have her as a photographer, and say she takes a picture of Clark and Diana, and she uses that image to create Donna in a mirror, magic mirror, or something like that. Just make it different, but use one of the many origins of Donna. And I just feel like the mirror origin works because as children are in real life, they are a reflection of their parents. So have her as a reflection of either Diana or Diana and Clark.
I can like that. I can like that. So
And
then, yeah, go ahead.
and then of course the uh I wouldn't say it's a constant thing because they learn how to, um, like their fears later kind of dwindles and goes away. But because Clark still is that natural protector, he is he's going to let Diana do her thing. But as, you know, as a natural protector and the man that loves her, he is still going to do that, naturally protect her. So yeah, that is the one thing that they would sometimes go back and forth with, but Diana appreciates him. And also going back to Perez, how Clark, even if with being Diana, he sets an expectation to himself because he holds Diana to a high regard. So he believes that Diana deserves more. But at the same time, he's like, I can give her that more. I just want to, you know, basically reach that expectation that I set for myself. And then Diana, she is, with knowing the history that the Amazons have had with men still, it's still just that, just underlying type. She's open with Clark, of course, but it's still that feeling that of sometimes being just a little guarded, even though she trusts him, completely. It's just you will have that doesn't easily go away. And especially with this being such a serious relationship with her, that is something, so it's looked at as kind of sacred, so you have to be a little bit for her cautious.
Exactly. So then you get to gender and power dynamics, because you do have to kind of talk about it. But I do love, again, I'm going to bring it up again after Clark beats the crap out of Apollo. He goes, before you say anything, I know you could have handled it. And then Diana says, yeah, but it was fun to watch. So I really liked how like he goes, I know you could have handled this yourself. And she's like, yes, I could have, but this was more fun.
Exactly. That's what I mean. It's that balance of Clark is naturally going to be a protector, and he's going to want to protect Diana. He's going to want to stand up for her, and he's going to naturally do it. But he is also going to step back and let Diana do her thing. And she sees, as long as she knows that and sees that, then, you know, there won't be a problem. So, yeah, again, Soule, he knew that he got the balance um, down of their personalities, of their natural conflict. It was Tomasi putting his own preferences, biasness, and just his own view that he couldn't get the character. He wrote a um, black and yellow, black and gold, sorry, black and gold story for Wonder Woman, and this same characterization that we had for Superman and Wonder Woman when he was writing her is the same characterization that he has in that book. So yeah, that's all he sees Diana as this warrior woman.
I know. And that's sad. Which okay. So speaking of not understanding Wonder Woman's world, all right. So Brit, correct me if I'm wrong. I'm pretty sure Themyscira is not a city.
Right. It is a mythical island.
What?
It's a
Not only that.
nation.
Not only that. It's an island nation. That's like saying the United States is a city.
Right. It, it yeah.
I love how you are like, yeah, you're right.
um, it's a lot of things that wrong with this preview and everything. First, you have, of course, the glorification and glazing of Lois, as the most powerful woman because she is basically making a deal with the devil and in the sense of corrupted media, but she wants the power. She is EIC, and they basically want to now after what 2 years, 2 or 3 years,
Mm-hmm.
they want to elevate Lois and want to push her being EIC is such this big thing and this big accomplishment, but it really doesn't matter. And just the fact that you have to force in other characters like their cities or island and their like Gotham has its own news outlet,
So
you
do
know,
all these other cities. So what are you doing?
and yeah, and Themyscira does not need Man's World News. Like they have mirrors and mythical ways of communication to get news. They don't need the Daily Planet to set up shop um, on the island, and the island isn't open to you know
Watch, they'll
any.
make it so they'll open to Lois.
And if they do that, that is definitely a it's a slap in the face because Diana keeps getting thrown under the bus for Lois, as the article indicates, and it's very like it makes no sense how they have to degrade Diana for Lois.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, you to say that Lois is the most powerful,
Yeah.
and only by way of being in control of the media. So she is basically putting out um a basically a biased like point of view perspective, and but she's living a lie, and she's been living a lie. How can you be the EIC and talk about you are uh speaking on truths and want truths to be exposed, but yet you are living the biggest lie there is. You know, you have Clark. He writes on himself. Lois, apparently, well, it has been that way, but before she got the EIC promotion, she was writing on Superman, or he was giving her stories. You know, that is, as we've, talked about, is the conflict of interest, and it's never spoke up on. It's
Oh, trust me.
never
If I wrote Superman, that'd be the first thing I would talk about. It would literally be the first, like, the first panel would be a news article, and it says Lois Lane forced to step down after conflict of interest finally exposed.
that would be now that would actually sell copies.
Yeah, the whole story arc would be called "The Fall of Lois Lane." I love it. But
That is
also, here's the thing, Britt. You know what I literally just realized? If the Amazons have been hunted by the U.S. government, why would they agree to this?
exactly.
Wait a minute. Tom King just made this null and void. You can't do this.
No. And I believe there was it was on Bleeding Cool. It was in the comment section that someone said that they read the first issue, and it definitely reads like you are changing the status quo, or just making things happen just for the sake of it. It's just to make it work when clearly it doesn't. I don't like the art style because it just seems rushed and it seems wonky. And also Clark with his galoot behavior, and he looks very sweaty. I don't know. It just he looks like he needs a shower.
Yeah, exactly. And he looks really like wet and stuff.
I don't know whether he was in the rain or the fact that he's sweaty and needs a shower, but that artwork is just not cool, and I don't like even with uh the way Superman himself is drawn, in the costume. It just does not work. Um uh Also, I think the ending of that story, I saw it on Twitter or Reddit, but the girl playing the guitar, why does she look like she's like cosplaying Joker?
Here, let me see this. I have the issue up, so let me see this. Girl play. She does look like she's cosplaying Joker. Oh my god. Oh my god.
It's a lot going on.
What?
It's
It's the best part, Brett. On the reverse side, we have Absolute. We have the Titans for Absolute with someone walking through, and we're getting like descriptions of all the heroes. And when it gets to Wonder Woman, it says that she moves with confidence of someone who has always known she was meant for something more. Though our journey looks very different, I can relate.
I like that. I like that line.
Mm-hmm.
That is actually a fire line. That is good.
It's written by Jeff Lemire. He's the one that's writing Absolute Flash right now.
Well, that's really good.
Well,
Well,
again, it doesn't surprise me that the Absolute gets these characters more than the main line.
because the main line is so stuck on is confusing, messed up continuity and trying to make things work. Knowing that half this stuff is just, you know, basically stagnant, and you're trying to force it to keep being accepted. It's like you have to change. Um and I think it's also just a stall for these uh for the next event that they're obviously building up to. But I say that year two of Absolute is still going to wash the main line.
Oh yeah.
Even with this slot book, I wouldn't be surprised if, of course, it's you have tons of variant covers. So it's a possibility that it would be top 20, you know, maybe. But I wouldn't be surprised if the book end up dropping and basically be below even the main Superman book at by the sixth issue.
Yeah, I got to be honest. I'm not picking this one up because I'll just stick with the main book. But it's like it's kind of yeah. It would be hilarious if this is the lowest selling Superman book. But speaking of Superman books, absolute. And when I saw this Braniac design, because I was wondering how are they going to pull off Braniac, and I'm like, oh my god.
Yeah,
If ever there was an absolute Braniac, that's an absolute Braniac.
it's very creepy. Will definitely give you nightmares. And the face I really thought of New 52 Joker.
Yeah, yeah. Oh, you mean the face he cut off himself?
Yes. And it Braniacs look like that.
Yeah, he does, but it looks dope.
Yeah. If anything, Absolute Universe definitely has great designs. It's um, much better than New 52 overall. Well, for now with Persephone and Hades from Absolute Wonder Woman
Oh yeah, that's
6 and
way
7.
better.
Yeah, those designs and just the artists that honestly, like I continue to say, Sherman is a good artist, and it gives Absolute Wonder Woman the distinctive style and everything like that. However, the artist for issue 6 and 7, that is just like amazing.
I
And
told you because when he was announced as the writer, as the artist for the next two issues, I was like, where have I seen that art before? Then I realized in the Birds, there was a Birds of Prey like backup during the Absolute Power days. And I remember looking at this and I'm like, this is the guy? He has this badass image of Barda jumping out of a helicopter, and I was looking up and I'm like, oh yeah, this is gonna be dope. And I remember I sent it to you, his profile to you, and you went, oh my god.
yeah, and I just love how he gives Absolute it's so much detail, but her eyes and her hair and
It's
her
cinematic as well.
exactly. And it just feels like it fits the epicness that Absolute Wonder Woman deserves,
Mm-hmm.
and the way she's standing out already, that I would say that artist really gives her even more push of standing out. So yeah, I would much like I said, I like Sherman's art, but I would much rather have that artist as the Absolute Wonder Woman
Or at least have
primary
them
artist.
alternate
Or
occasionally,
yeah,
like like Sherman does a bunch of issues, and then this guy comes on to do more.
yes, something like that. But I definitely want more of that art, even if it is. I mean, I definitely want to see his Superman. So it's
Oh
kind of like,
yes.
yeah, like that would be very much. Oh yeah, please. If there were to be a hypothetical Superman and Wonder Woman book, he's the artist for sure. If, but of course, I have to see his Superman Clark first because I don't like the galoot, you know, hunched over and acting so much like a klutz as Slot has him
Yeah,
characterized here.
I told you, all these writers want Superman to be the way that they were when they were kids. That's what it is.
No, and that is so tired. Please stop doing that.
Well,
We,
trust me, Britt, I want them to stop that.
yeah, in this modern time, he doesn't have to over exaggerate himself. Even New 52 Superman, he had a quietness to him, to himself. But he did not slouch over. He
Hmm.
was, he was just like this tall, quiet guy, nice guy, and very reserved. And that's it. That's all you have to have. And I mean, he also explained that of Clark wears the glasses. He's the one that's kind of, again, mostly reserved. But then it's Superman who stands out a little bit more, who is more open to the people. And that is modern time, how you can contrast the two. You don't have to do the over exaggerations.
Yeah, exactly. But I think that is a great place to leave this episode, clocking at 3 hours and 17 minutes. Oh, it's a very respectable length. But yeah, but ultimately, what this run is not total. It's because too much of the Brit and I want to do this because too much of the Wonder Woman fandom treats this era like it's irredeemable, and it's not. It's clear. Well, let me put it this way. Again, I ask you, if you've somehow made it this far, would you rather have this or Absolute Wonder, this or Tom King's Wonder Woman? Pick one. I'm pretty sure people would rather have this one.
Exactly.
But actually, Britt, which would you rather have?
I would definitely have New 52. Even if she wasn't with Clark, I would definitely just, as a standalone story from Azzarello, I would much rather have that story than than Tom King. And one more thing I would like to add is, with Azzarello trying to put Diana with Orion as well, and that whole thing of
Oh
him
yeah.
being, calling her legs and being just a sexist jerk. That is another thing that's no, because that is what the Amazons are against. So any type of, that's pretty much why I don't like her relationship with Steve, because Steve, in some cases, he falls in those categories of what the Amazons go against. Um, and especially New 52 Steve being in the military, you know, and just the way he guilt trips and manipulates Diana. Again, with Clark, she has a relationship that is respectful to her, and it, it's the concept itself and the ideas and everything that goes along with it, not so much as how writers want to water it down and make it all about powers. No, I mean, we've read even many of DC encyclopedias that feature the relationship, and they always say it's a relationship of equals. They are a partnership. They have understanding as outsiders. So it is a lot more to that relationship than obviously people want to give it credit for. With New 52 Diana herself, again, just these little tweaks here and there to really expand on the Diana that we know, and it would have been fine. She definitely would have been fine. The biggest problem definitely was John's, and honestly, we saw that bleed into DCEU and even Rebirth.
Exactly. Exactly. So, Britt, do you have any stories you want to tease us with, or
Uh,
anything
okay,
funny? If you're gonna try and squeeze some tears at me, because I got about 5 ideas.
I know. So, Jared, you definitely are going into the beehive. You are.
I still don't know what that means, but okay.
It's the fandom, Jared. It's the fandom name.
Okay. Oh, for Beyonce, I should have known that.
Yeah, you are. Well, you're the one that sent the tweet saying that,
I know. I kind
in
of,
the reference.
I deserve it.
Yeah, so you are slowly getting into it. So if I can't get too many of my points, getting you into the beehive is so much more fun.
I've never watched so much. So I've watched more Beyonce content because of this woman than I ever have before.
However, it is giving us good ideas, though. It is an
That's true.
inspiration. It is the inspiration for Odyssey and having fun with building our character, Olympia, and making her both I would say, yeah, using what I said about Donna as a reflection of, Diana and Clark, and especially of Diana, you know, um, and this this young warrior who just wants to be with her family, and she's learning so much, especially from Aphrodite. And the scene that I'm writing, I'm definitely gonna get a couple of tears and a couple of real tears, maybe, hopefully, and cat gifs. But with
Oh, I know at least one of these I'll be getting a cat gif.
so and preparing for Mother's Day, hopefully to have one shots for that. I'm finishing up a one shot that I'm trying to have uploaded. Well, of course, Jared gets the exclusive, but trying to have uploaded within the next week, and finishing Odyssey Chapter 2, and also Shelter Story 1 Chapter 4. And all of these other stories that we have. Just the Shelterverse continues to expand. We talk we talk about the story that we already have, and then 2 days later or so, we have a completely different story. And it's just so fun that we are building a universe that it's not just for Super Wonder fans, it's also for individually Superman and Wonder Woman fans. If, of course, they want to indulge with us, because we do have respect for these characters and we see them as sort of who they are supposed to be, with whether we are rewriting stories that have mischaracterized the characters, or we are blending, our favorite aspects of the character to create one basically ultimate anomaly, um, and just give fans, I think, what's missing, what we believe that's missing in the main continuity, and respecting them as individuals and their relationship, whether we write them as a couple or just best friends.
Exactly. On that, stay heroic, everyone. Remember, Lois Lane is Lois Lane. She belongs to General Zod, and Steve Trevor, Steve Never. He belongs 6 feet in the ground. Zois and Max about for life. I will see you later. Bye bye.